Lying on a cold operating table with a scalpel inches from your body changes a man, but realizing the surgeon holding that blade is conspiring with your wife to steal your legacy destroys him. I am Solomon Banks. I am 70 years old. I built a $50 million logistics empire from a single rusted truck, and today I am supposed to be asleep. The sedative was meant to knock me out completely for a routine vasectomy, but as the local anesthetic numbed my lower half, my mind remained terrifyingly awake. I could not move my eyelids. I could not twitch a finger. I was a prisoner in my own flesh, listening to the metallic clink of surgical instruments and the heavy breathing of Dr. Fletcher. Then came the words that stopped my heart cold. Be careful with that sample, nurse. That vial is worth $5 million on the gray market if we handle it right, and make sure you give his wife this envelope immediately. Do not let him see it under any circumstances. My blood ran cold. I lay there paralyzed while they harvested my DNA like I was nothing more than a prize bull. I wanted to scream. I wanted to thrash. But decades of discipline as a Marine kicked in before my heart rate monitor could betray me. I engaged the tactical breathing I learned in the trenches. Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4. I forced my heart to beat with the slow rhythm of a sleeping man while inside my mind was screaming for war. Before I continue this story, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to fight a battle everyone thought you would lose. The procedure felt like an eternity of violation. Every touch of metal against my skin felt like a betrayal, not just by the doctor, but by the woman waiting outside. Beatrice, my wife of 40 years, the woman I had lifted from poverty, the woman who was now apparently orchestrating something so dark that a surgeon had to whisper about it. I focused on the rhythm of the heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. If I spiked now, Fletcher would know I was conscious. He might panic. He might slip with that scalpel. He might kill me right here to cover his tracks. So I played dead. I let them finish their theft. When the procedure finally ended, I felt the gurney moving. My body was heavy like lead, a side effect of the partial sedation that had paralyzed my muscles but failed to dim my senses. They wheeled me into a recovery bay. Through the slit of my slightly parted eyelids, I saw the world in a blur of sterile white and gray. The nurse parked me and walked toward the waiting area. The door was left slightly ajar. I adjusted my breathing again, sharpening my hearing. I needed to know where that envelope went. I saw her, Beatrice. She was standing by the window, checking her reflection in a compact mirror. She was wearing the mink coat I bought her last Christmas, the one that cost more than my first 3 cars combined. She looked impatient, not worried. She was tapping her foot, checking her watch. I heard her voice drift through the crack in the door, sharp and annoyed. Is the old man done yet? I have an appointment at Saks in an hour. The nurse approached her. Beatrice did not even look up until the nurse cleared her throat. I saw the exchange happen in slow motion. The nurse pulled a thick manila envelope from her scrubs. It was heavy, thick. Beatrice snatched it with a greed that made my stomach turn. She did not open it. She glanced around the hallway, her eyes darting like a thief before shoving the envelope deep into the pocket of her mink coat. It is all there, the nurse whispered. The contracts, the donor specifications, everything Paige needs for the next step. Paige, my daughter-in-law. The white woman my son Tyrone had married 3 years ago, the woman who looked at me with a smile that never reached her eyes, the woman who treated our family dinners like networking events. Why was Paige involved in my vasectomy? Why was my DNA being discussed as a donor specification? The pieces of the puzzle were floating in my mind, but I could not put them together yet. All I knew was that my genetic material and a stack of legal documents were now in my wife's pocket, and I was supposed to be the senile old man who knew nothing. Beatrice hung the coat on a rack in the corner of the private recovery room as she stepped inside. She put on her mask, the mask of the loving wife. Her face transformed instantly from annoyance to exaggerated concern. She walked over to my gurney. Oh, my poor Solomon, she cooed, smoothing my forehead with a hand that felt as cold as ice. Wake up, darling. It is all over. I let out a groan. It was not hard. The pain was real and the emotional agony was worse. I fluttered my eyes open, pretending to be groggy and disoriented. I needed her to believe the charade. I needed her to lower her guard. Beatrice. I croaked, my voice dry and raspy. Water. I need water. Of course, darling, she said, pouring a cup from the pitcher on the bedside table. She helped me sit up slightly. Her perfume was overpowering. A floral scent that used to smell like home but now smelled like deception. The coat was hanging on the chair 3 feet away. The envelope was creating a visible bulge in the left pocket. I needed that envelope, but I could not just walk over and take it. My legs were still numb and she was watching me like a hawk. I needed a distraction. I needed a reason for her to leave the room even for a minute. She brought the cup to my lips. I took a sip. My hands were shaking partly from the drugs, partly from the rage boiling in my veins. I looked at her. I looked at the expensive silk blouse she was wearing under the coat. It was pristine white. Perfect. I made my move. I let my hand spasm. It was a violent jerking motion, a convincing performance of a man losing motor control. The cup flew from my hand. Hot water splashed all over the front of her silk blouse, soaking the fabric instantly. Beatrice shrieked. She jumped back, looking down at the stain spreading across her chest with horror. "You clumsy old fool," she hissed before catching herself. She looked at the door, checking if anyone heard her break character. She took a deep breath and forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. "Oh, Solomon, look what happened. This is dry clean only." "I am sorry," I mumbled, letting my head loll back against the pillow. "My hands. I cannot feel my hands." She looked at the wet stain with disgust. "I have to go clean this up before it sets. Stay here. Do not move." "As if I could go anywhere," I muttered. She grabbed her purse, but she left the coat. She left the coat on the chair. She turned and marched toward the restroom down the hall, her heels clicking aggressively against the linoleum floor. I counted. 1, 2, 3. I heard the restroom door whoosh shut. I had 60 seconds, maybe less. I threw off the thin hospital blanket. My legs felt like rubber. When I swung them over the side of the bed, my feet hit the floor with a dull thud I could barely feel. I gritted my teeth. I was a Marine. I had marched 20 miles with a fractured ankle in the muddy rain. I could walk 3 feet to a chair. I pushed myself up. My knees buckled instantly. I grabbed the bed rail, my knuckles turning white. I dragged myself forward. 1 step. Pain shot through my groin, a sharp reminder of the surgery. I ignored it. 2 steps. I was panting. The room was spinning. I reached the chair. I grabbed the mink coat. The fur felt greasy under my fingers. I jammed my hand into the left pocket. My fingers brushed against the cool paper of the envelope. I pulled it out. It was sealed with red wax. Official. Expensive. I did not have time to read it here. I could hear footsteps in the hall. Was it her? Was it the nurse? I looked around frantically. Where could I hide it? My hospital gown had no pockets. My clothes were in a plastic bag on the lower shelf of the bedside table. No time to reach them. I looked at the pillow. No, she might fluff it. I looked at the mattress. I lifted the edge of the mattress with my last ounce of strength and shoved the envelope deep underneath, right in the center where my weight would hide the lump. I scrambled back to the bed. I threw my legs up. I pulled the blanket up to my chin. I closed my eyes and focused on my breathing again just as the door handle turned. Beatrice walked in, dabbing at her blouse with wet paper towels. She looked at the chair. She looked at the coat. She looked at me. I let out a soft snore, my mouth slightly open, my face relaxed in feigned sleep. She stared at me for a long moment. I could feel her suspicion radiating across the room. She walked over to the chair and patted the pocket of her coat. She felt the emptiness. She froze. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. This was it. She was going to know. She checked the other pocket. Then she checked her purse. She let out a frustrated sigh. "I must have left it in the car," she muttered to herself. "I am losing my mind dealing with this invalid." She did not know. She thought she had misplaced it. She was too arrogant to believe I could have moved fast enough to take it. She underestimated me. That was her mistake. That has always been their mistake. They see the gray hair and the slow walk and they think the fire is gone. They think Solomon Banks is just a relic. But relics are dangerous things when you dust them off. Beatrice sat down in the chair, pulling out her phone to text someone, probably Tyrone or Paige, probably updating them on the successful harvest. I lay there on top of the evidence that would destroy my family, waiting for the feeling to return to my legs. I needed to get out of this hospital. I needed to get that envelope into a safe place. And I needed to prepare for war. Because whatever was inside that envelope was important enough to risk everything for, and I was about to find out why. The nurse came in 10 minutes later with discharge papers. Mr. Banks, you seem to be recovering nicely, she said, her voice overly cheerful. We can get you dressed now. I sat up slowly. Beatrice stood up and turned her back to give me privacy as I dressed. This was my chance. I grabbed my pants from the plastic bag. As I slid them on, I reached under the mattress and in one fluid motion transferred the envelope into the waistband of my trousers, tucking it under my shirt. It was bulky, but my loose-fitting dress shirt covered it. I stood up, buttoning my shirt, my hands steady now. Ready to go home, darling? Beatrice asked, turning around. Ready, I said. She offered me her arm. I took it. I leaned on her, letting her support my weight, letting her feel like she was in control. We walked out of the hospital together, the loving wife and the fragile husband. But as we walked toward the exit, I saw Dr. Fletcher watching us from the nurse's station. He gave Beatrice a subtle nod. She nodded back. A conspiracy. A partnership. I tightened my grip on her arm just slightly. Is something wrong, Solomon? She asked. Just a little pain, I said. It will pass. We got into the car. Beatrice drove. She drove her Mercedes, the one I paid for cash. She talked about the weather. She talked about a dinner party Paige was organizing for the weekend. We are going to celebrate your recovery, she said. Paige is inviting some of her friends. It will be nice for you to socialize. Socialize. She meant I would be the prop. The old black man in the corner while her white friends drank my wine and discussed art they did not understand. That sounds lovely, Beatrice, I said. I touched the envelope through my shirt. I could feel the sharp edges of the paper against my skin. We arrived home. The house was quiet. Too quiet. You should rest, Beatrice said. I made you some special herbal tea. It will help you sleep. She went to the kitchen. I went to the bedroom. I heard the clinking of a spoon against a ceramic mug. I sat on the edge of the bed and pulled out the envelope. I broke the wax seal. My hands were trembling, not from age, but from adrenaline. I pulled out the documents. The first page made me gasp. It was a surrogacy agreement. But it was not standard. The intended parents were listed as Tyrone Banks and Paige Banks. But the donor section was what stopped my heart. Sperm donor anonymous. Donor ID Banks Sr. My vision blurred. I had to read it again. Banks Sr. They were not just stealing my money, they were stealing my lineage. They were stealing me. I flipped to the next page. A medical report attached. Patient Tyrone Banks. Diagnosis sterility. Secondary to untreated mumps infection in childhood. I closed my eyes. The memories flooded back. Tyrone had been 12. He had been sick, feverish, swollen. I had been building the company, working 18-hour days, driving trucks across state lines. Beatrice had said she would handle it. She said it was just a flu. She never took him to the specialist. She let it run its course. And now I knew the cost. My son was sterile, and he knew it. And instead of telling me, instead of adopting like I had adopted him, he and his wife had hatched a plan to use my DNA to create a child. A child they would pass off as mine, or worse, pass off as theirs to secure the inheritance. A child that would biologically be my son or daughter, raised as my grandchild by a woman who despised my race, and a son who despised my existence. I heard Beatrice's footsteps on the stairs. I shoved the papers back into the envelope. I looked around the room frantically. Where? Where to hide it? The vent, the air conditioning vent near the floor. I dropped to my knees, ignoring the pain. I pried the cover loose with my fingernails. I slid the envelope inside, pushing it deep into the ductwork. I snapped the cover back on just as the door handle turned. I scrambled onto the bed, pulling the covers up. Beatrice walked in holding a steaming mug. Here you go, darling, she said. Drink this. It will make all the pain go away. I smelled the steam rising from the cup. Beneath the peppermint and the honey, there was a faint underlying scent. Bitter almonds. I knew that smell. I had smelled it in chemical warehouses. Cyanide. Or maybe just a massive dose of sedatives strong enough to stop an old man's heart. She was not just trying to make me sleep. She was trying to make sure I never woke up, or at least that I slept soundly enough for them to finish whatever they needed to do tonight. Thank you, Beatrice, I said, taking the cup. You are too good to me. She smiled. Drink up. I will be downstairs if you need me. She left, closing the door. I walked to the window. I opened the sash. I poured the tea into the planter box outside the window where the geraniums grew. I watched the brown liquid sink into the soil. I lay back on the bed, fully dressed, shoes still on. I waited. 10 minutes later, the door opened again. This time, it was not just Beatrice. It was Tyrone and Paige. They crept into the room. "Is he out?" Tyrone whispered. "He drank the whole cup," Beatrice said. "He will be out for 12 hours, Good Paige said. Her voice was sharp, devoid of the fake sweetness she used when I was awake. "Let's find the checkbook. And get his thumbprint for the banking app. We need to transfer the funds for the clinic before morning." I lay there, eyes closed, breathing slow and deep, while my family, my wolves, circled my bed. They thought the lion was sleeping. They were wrong. The lion was just waiting for the right moment to bite. I locked the heavy door of the hospital restroom and leaned against it, breathing hard. My legs were still numb from the local anesthetic, and every step felt like walking on wet sand, but I had made it. I was alone. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a pale, sickly glow on the white tiles. I pulled the envelope from my waistband where I had hidden it seconds before leaving the recovery room. My hands were shaking, not from age or weakness, but from a rage so cold it made my teeth chatter. I broke the wax seal again, my fingers clumsy with urgency. I pulled out the documents. I needed to see it. I needed to confirm that the madness I thought I saw earlier was real. I unfolded the thick legal paper. It was a surrogacy agreement drafted by a law firm I recognized, a firm known for making problems disappear for the wealthy and corrupt. The intended parents were clearly listed: Tyrone Banks and Paige Banks, my son and his wife. But my eyes went straight to the donor section. The line that should have been blank or filled with a random code from a sperm bank was typed out in bold black letters. Anonymous Donor ID Banks Senior. The air left the room. Banks Senior. Me. I stared at the paper, and the black letters seemed to swim before my eyes. They were not just stealing my money. They were stealing my genetic code. They were stealing the very essence of who I was. I leaned over the sink, gripping the cold porcelain to keep from falling. A memory flashed in my mind, vivid and painful. It was 28 years ago. Tyrone was 12 years old. He was burning up with a fever, his neck swollen like a bullfrog. Mumps. It had hit him hard and fast. I remembered the doctor pulling me into the hallway, his face grim. He told me the infection had spread. He told me the inflammation was severe. He told me my son would likely never father children. I remembered the weight of that news. I looked at my boy lying in that bed, weak and scared, and I made a decision. I decided to carry that burden for him. I never told him he was sterile. I wanted him to grow up feeling like a man. I wanted him to have confidence. I buried that secret deep in my heart alongside the sacrifices I made to build my company. I thought I was protecting him. But now, standing in a hospital bathroom with my stolen future in my hands, I realized my mistake. Tyrone knew. He had to know. And instead of coming to me, instead of adopting or finding a donor, he and that woman had hatched a plan so twisted it made my stomach turn. They were using my vasectomy as a cover to harvest my sperm. They were going to use my own fatherhood against me to create a child they could pass off as the heir to the bank's empire. A child that would technically be my son or daughter, raised as my grandchild by a woman who looked at me like I was the help. It was incestuous in a clinical, detached way that was somehow worse than the physical act. They were violating me on a cellular level. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. It looked like an old flip phone, a piece of junk befitting a senile old man who barely knew how to text. But inside the casing, it was a high-tech smartphone with an encrypted cloud backup. I learned a long time ago in the logistics business that information is the only currency that matters. I opened the camera app. I snapped photos of every page, the signatures, the dates, the medical addendum confirming the viability of the sample. I made sure the lighting was clear. I made sure every damning word was legible. Just as I photographed the last page, a heavy fist pounded on the door. Boom, boom, boom. "Mr. Banks, are you all right in there?" It was Dr. Fletcher. His voice was not the concerned tone of a physician. It was the sharp, suspicious bark of a co-conspirator who realized his mark had been out of sight for too long. My heart hammered against my ribs. He suspected. He knew I should not be able to walk this well. He knew I should be groggy. If he came in here, if he saw these papers, the game would be over. They would sedate me for real this time. They might even induce a heart attack and claim surgical complications. I shoved the papers back into the envelope. I folded it in half, creasing the crisp document, and jammed it deep into the inside pocket of my jacket. I grabbed the flush handle and pushed it down. The loud roar of the water was my cover. I took a deep breath, forcing my facial muscles to slacken, forcing my eyes to look vacant and watery. I unlocked the door. Dr. Fletcher was standing there, his hand raised to knock again. He looked annoyed. His eyes darted past me, scanning the small room, checking for anything out of place. "Mr. Banks," he said, his voice tight, "you have been in here a long time. You should not be walking around unassisted. The anesthesia has not fully worn off." I looked at him and let my jaw hang loose. I gave him a confused, embarrassed smile. "Just the plumbing, doc." I mumbled, my voice shaky. "Old pipes, just like me. Takes a while to get the water flowing, you know." I patted his arm with a trembling hand, playing the part of the harmless, oversharing old man. I saw the tension leave his shoulders. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and disgust. He bought it. He saw what he wanted to see. A feeble old man leaking in a bathroom, not a Marine gathering intelligence behind enemy lines. "Let's get you back to your wife," he said, gripping my arm a little too tightly. "She is waiting in the car. We do not want to keep Beatrice waiting, do we?" "No," I said, letting him lead me. "We certainly do not." The ride home was a blur of feigned sleep and boiling rage. Beatrice drove her Mercedes with one hand, texting with the other. She did not speak to me. She turned up the radio, drowning out the silence between us. I watched the city pass by through half-closed eyes. Every building we passed, every truck with the Banks Logistics logo on the side was a reminder of what I had built and what they were trying to take. When we pulled into the driveway of our estate, the house loomed large and imposing. It used to be a sanctuary. Now it felt like a fortress occupied by enemy combatants. The front door opened before we even reached the steps. Paige was standing there. She was wearing a yellow sundress, her blonde hair perfectly styled, a look of angelic concern plastered on her face. But her eyes were cold. They scanned me, assessing my condition, looking for signs of weakness. "Welcome home, Dad," she cooed, coming down the steps. She kissed my cheek. Her lips felt dry and artificial. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," I said, leaning heavily on the cane I did not really need. "Just tired." "Let's get you inside," she said, taking my other arm. Beatrice took the left, Paige took the right. They marched me into the house like I was a prisoner being escorted to his cell. We went into the living room. Tyrone was there, sitting on the couch, looking at his laptop. He stood up when we entered, but he did not come over. He looked guilty, or maybe just impatient. "Hey, Pops," he said. "Good to see you up." I looked at my son, the boy I had carried on my shoulders, the boy I had taught to throw a baseball. I looked for the child I loved, but all I saw was a weak man hiding behind his wife's ambition. "I need to sit down," I said, sinking into my leather armchair. "Of course," Paige said. "I made you something special, a nice herbal tea. It will help you relax and sleep. The doctor said you need lots of rest." She walked to the kitchen and returned a moment later with a steaming ceramic mug. She held it out to me with both hands, a gesture of servitude that felt mocking. "Here, drink this," she said softly. "It is my grandmother's recipe, peppermint and chamomile. It does wonders for pain." I took the mug. The warmth seeped into my cold hands. I brought it to my nose, pretending to savor the aroma. The peppermint was strong, pungent, almost overwhelming. But beneath the sharp scent of mint and the sweetness of honey, there was something else. A faint underlying odor that triggered a primitive alarm in my brain. Bitter almonds. I froze internally. I knew that smell. I had spent years in warehouses dealing with industrial chemicals. I knew what cyanide smelled like. But cyanide was too fast, too obvious. No, this was likely a massive dose of crushed sedatives, maybe something derived from apricot kernels or a potent benzodiazepine cocktail she had ground up. Whatever it was not herbal tea. They did not just want me to sleep, they wanted me comatose. They needed me out of the way tonight. They probably needed my thumbprint again, or maybe they were bringing someone into the house. I looked at Paige. She was watching me intently, her smile fixed and rigid. Her blue eyes were locked on the cup, waiting for me to take the first sip. "Thank you, Paige," I said, lowering the cup. "You are always so thoughtful." "Drink it while it is hot, Dad," she urged. "It works better that way." "I will," I said. "I just need to use the restroom first. All that fluid at the hospital, you know." I started to rise. "Oh, you can drink it later," she said quickly, reaching out to take the cup back. No, I insisted, holding it tight. "I will take it with me. I like to sip it slowly." I shuffled toward the hallway bathroom, the one next to my bedroom. I felt their eyes on my back. I knew I had about 2 minutes before they became suspicious. I entered the bathroom and locked the door. I did not flush it down the toilet. That was too risky. If they were suspicious, they might check the bowl for residue or smell the drain. I looked at the window. On the sill sat a large potted snake plant, a sansevieria. My mother used to call it mother-in-law's tongue because it was impossible to kill. I hoped the name held true. I opened the window, just a crack to let in a breeze, then I poured the steaming brown liquid into the dense soil of the plant. The earth drank it up instantly. I rinsed the cup in the sink, quietly drying it with a towel to remove any droplets. Then I waited. I counted to 60. I flushed the toilet for effect. I walked out of the bathroom holding the empty mug. I let my eyelids droop. I let my shoulders sag. I walked with a slight stumble. That was delicious. I slurred slightly, letting my words run together. Very soothing. Paige's eyes lit up. She took the empty mug from my hand. "I am so glad, Dad. You look sleepy already." "I am," I muttered. "I think I need to lay down." Beatrice appeared at the top of the stairs. "Go to bed, Solomon. We will handle everything down here." I climbed the stairs, gripping the banister. Every step was a performance. I made it to my bedroom and closed the door. I did not lock it. Locking it would signal that I was hiding something. I sat on the bed and took off my shoes, dropping them loudly on the floor. I lay back on the pillows, fully dressed. I slowed my breathing. I waited. 10 minutes later, the handle turned slowly. The door creaked open. I kept my eyes closed, my breathing rhythmic and deep, a gentle snore rumbling in my chest. I sensed them entering the room. I could smell Paige's perfume and the stale tobacco smoke that clung to Tyrone. "He is out," Tyrone whispered. "Good," Paige replied, her voice stripped of all warmth. "That cocktail would knock out a horse. Grab his iPad. We have work to do." I lay there motionless, a soldier in the trenches waiting for the enemy to cross the line. They thought they had drugged a helpless old man. They had no idea they had just armed a bomb. The sound of my own snoring was the only thing keeping me alive. I lay on my back with my mouth slightly open, forcing a rhythmic rasp from my throat that mimicked deep sedation. It was a performance I had perfected in the trenches decades ago when playing dead was the difference between going home and being left behind. But the enemy circling me now wasn't a foreign soldier. It was my son and his wife. I heard the distinct sound of the bedside drawer sliding open. The wood scraped against wood, a noise that seemed deafening in the quiet room. Tyrone was breathing heavy, fast, shallow breaths like a man running from something, or a man desperate for a fix. "Damn it," he hissed. "Nothing. Just cough drops and old reading glasses. Where does he keep the cash?" I felt the mattress shift as he leaned over, searching under the lamp. I kept my breathing steady. "Inhale for 4. Rattle the throat. Exhale for 4. Check the bottom drawer," Paige whispered. Her voice was sharp, commanding. She wasn't panic-searching like Tyrone. She was supervising. She was the general of this pathetic little army. I heard papers shuffling. They were tossing my life onto the floor, my journal, photos of Beatrice from 40 years ago, birthday cards Tyrone had signed when he was 10. They meant nothing to them. They were just obstacles in the hunt for green paper. "Found something," Tyrone said. I tensed, expecting the worst. $500, he scoffed. $500. That is it. The man is worth millions, and he keeps $500 in his nightstand. Cheap old bastard. The insult stung, but not for the reason he thought. It stung because it showed how little he understood about wealth. He thought rich men kept stacks of bills under their mattresses like drug dealers. He didn't understand that real money moves. It flows. It sits in accounts and investments protected by layers of security he couldn't even fathom. He was looking for crumbs while standing on a gold mine. "Keep looking," Paige snapped. "There has to be a ledger, a notebook. Old men always write down their passwords. Check under the rug, check the closet. They tore my room apart." I heard the crash of a vase, probably the blue ceramic one I bought in Morocco. I heard hangers clattering. They were violating my sanctuary, stripping away my privacy layer by layer. And all the while I lay there, a 68-year-old man pretending to be drugged while my heart hammered a war drum against my ribs. "Move over," Paige said suddenly. She was close. I could smell her perfume. It was expensive cloying, something bought with the credit card I paid off every month. "Give me the iPad." This was the moment I had anticipated, the moment the physical violation would begin. I felt the mattress dip significantly as she sat on the edge of the bed right next to my hip. Her presence was cold, radiating a predatory intent. "Tyrone, bring the lamp closer," she ordered. I saw the red glow of the light through my eyelids. It was bright, too bright. It took every ounce of my discipline not to flinch, not to squeeze my eyes shut tighter. I had to keep them relaxed heavy, as if the drugs had severed the connection between my brain and my nerves. She grabbed my right hand. Her fingers were cool and dry. She didn't hold my hand like a daughter-in-law comforting a sick man. She held it like a butcher holding a piece of meat. She manipulated my thumb, twisting my wrist to get the angle right. "Okay, old man," she whispered, her breath hitting my cheek. "Open sesame." She pressed my thumb onto the home button of the iPad. I heard the soft click. The screen woke up. I could feel the light shifting against my eyelids. She navigated quickly. Tap, tap, tap. She was looking for the banking app, the one with the blue shield icon, the one that held the keys to the operating accounts for the shell companies that still controlled banks' logistics. "Got it," she said. She pressed my thumb against the screen again. The biometric scanner activated. I waited. I knew what was coming. They thought they were smart. They thought a fingerprint was the only key. They didn't know that 3 months ago, after noticing small discrepancies in my household accounts, I had upgraded my security. I had hired a former Mossad cybersecurity expert to lock down my digital life. Access denied. The robotic voice of the app was soft, but in the silent room it sounded like a gunshot. "What the hell?" Paige hissed. "Try again." She jammed my thumb down harder, grinding it against the glass. It hurt. She was angry now, desperate. "Access denied. Multi-factor authentication required. Please scan iris." Iris. The word hung in the air. Paige froze. She let go of my hand and it fell limply onto the mattress. "Iris scan," she whispered. "Since when does a senile old truck driver use iris scans?" She didn't know. She didn't know that the senile old truck driver had government contracts that required top-secret clearance levels for his transport fleet. She didn't know that the man she mocked for watching old westerns spent his nights reading about blockchain and biometrics. She grabbed my face, her nails dug into my jaw. She tried to pry my eyelid open. This was it. If she forced my eye open, the jig was up. I would have to react. I would have to fight. I prepared to strike. I shifted my weight imperceptibly, ready to drive my elbow into her ribs. But the iPad let out a shrill, piercing beep. "Unauthorized access attempt detected. Location logged. Security protocol alpha initiated." The screen flashed red. I didn't need to see it to know what was happening. It was the silent alarm. But because I was home and on my secure Wi-Fi, the system went into lockdown mode. It didn't call the police. Not yet. It did something better. It sent a ping. A direct encrypted alert to the phone of Abraham O'Malley, my lawyer and the only man on earth I trusted with my life. Right now, 4 miles away in his penthouse apartment, O'Malley was looking at his phone. He saw the red alert. He saw the geolocation. He knew someone was trying to breach the vault. And he knew it wasn't me because I never accessed the accounts after 9 p.m. "Damn it!" Paige screamed. She threw the iPad. It spun through the air and landed with a heavy thud on the pillow right next to my head. The corner of the device grazed my ear. It took every year of my Marine Corps training not to flinch, not to gasp. I lay stone still, my breathing unchanged, while the adrenaline flooded my system like battery acid. "We have to go," Tyrone said, his voice thick with panic. "That thing is going to call the cops." "It is not calling the cops, you idiot," Paige snapped, though her voice was shaking. "It is just a banking app. It locked us out." She stood up, pacing the room, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor. He knew, she muttered. He knew we would try this. That is why he added the eye scan. "He is playing us." "He is asleep," Paige Tyrone argued. "Look at him. He is out cold. He is just paranoid. Old people get paranoid." Paige stopped pacing. "Paranoia is useful," she said, "but it complicates things. We cannot get the money tonight, not the big money." She walked out of the room into the hallway. I heard her footsteps recede, but she didn't go far. She stopped just outside the door. She pulled out her phone. I strained my ears, focusing on her voice, filtering out the sound of Tyrone rummaging through my closet, looking for loose change. "Pick up," she hissed. "Pick up, you little hacker rat." A pause. Then her voice changed. It became professional, cold, deadly. "Viper, it is me. We have a problem. The target has military-grade encryption. Fingerprint wasn't enough. It wants a retinal scan. No, I cannot get his eye open without waking him up or leaving a mark." She listened for a moment. "No, we cannot wait. The clinic needs the deposit by Friday or we lose the surrogate window. And we have debts, Viper. Debts that don't wait for retinal scans. She paced the hallway again. Okay, Plan A is burned. We need Plan B. Plan B. The words floated into the room, heavy with threat. Yes, she said. The medical route. I need a certificate. Incompetence. Dementia. Paranoia. Whatever you can cook up that sticks. I need power of attorney over his person and his estate. If I can't hack his bank, I will become his legal guardian. Then the bank has to give me the keys. She paused again, listening. I do not care how much it costs. Take it out of the first withdrawal. Just get the doctor ready. We will trigger the episode tomorrow. We will make him look so crazy they will lock him up and throw away the key. She hung up. I heard her walk back into the room. Let's go, she said to Tyrone. We are done here. But I didn't find anything, Tyrone whined. Just some watches. Leave them, she said. We don't need pocket change. We are taking the whole empire. They left the room. The door didn't close all the way. A sliver of light from the hallway cut across the floor. I waited until I heard their footsteps fade down the stairs. I waited until I heard the clink of a bottle in the kitchen. They were drinking, celebrating their backup plan. I opened my eyes. The room was dark, destroyed. My clothes were scattered, my privacy was shattered. But my mind was clear. They wanted to play the insanity card. They wanted to use the legal system to strip me of my rights, my dignity, and my freedom. They were going to gaslight me, drug me, and parade me in front of a judge as a broken old man. They didn't realize they had just given me the advantage. I knew their play. I knew their timeline. And thanks to the alert, I knew O'Malley was already awake and probably already digging. I sat up slowly, my joints aching. I picked up the iPad from the pillow. The screen was cracked but functional. I wiped my thumbprint off the glass. I looked at the notifications. One message from O'Malley. Protocol Ghost activated. Do you need extraction? I typed a response, my fingers flying over the glass. Negative. Let them come. Prepare the files on Dr. Fletcher and find out who Viper is. I deleted the message. I lay back down. Tomorrow they would try to break my mind. They would try to make me look like a monster or a fool. Let them try. I closed my eyes, but sleep was gone. I spent the rest of the night plotting. I built a mental map of the battlefield. I cataloged my assets. I listed my enemies. Paige, Tyrone, Beatrice, Dr. Fletcher. And now this Viper, a crime ring, a conspiracy. They thought they were hunting a gazelle. They were about to find out they had cornered a tiger. And the tiger was hungry. The morning sun did not bring relief, it brought an invasion. I woke up to the sound of tires crunching on gravel and the slam of expensive car doors. My head was still throbbing from the tension of the previous night, but I forced myself out of bed. I dressed slowly, putting on my comfortable old cardigan and slacks, the uniform of the harmless retiree they thought I was. When I walked downstairs, the transformation of my home was complete. The living room furniture had been rearranged to make space for a cocktail hour. Caterers were moving back and forth, carrying trays of hors d'oeuvres that cost more than my first week's paycheck. Paige was in the center of it all, conducting the chaos like a maestro. She was wearing a white dress that looked innocent but cost a fortune. When she saw me, her smile tightened. "Good morning, Dad," she said, her voice pitched high for the benefit of the catering staff. "We are having a little get-together to celebrate your recovery, just a few close friends." Close friends meant people I had never met. Within an hour, the house was full. They were Paige's crowd, young, wealthy, and overwhelmingly white. They walked through my home, touching my things, evaluating the architecture, and completely ignoring the man who owned it. I stood near the patio door watching them. To them, I was invisible. I was just part of the furniture, a relic that came with the estate. A young man in a linen suit bumped into me, spilling a drop of his mimosa. He did not apologize. He looked at me with a vague annoyance and handed me his empty glass. "You can take this," he said, "and bring another round when you have a chance." He thought I was the help. He thought the black man standing in the corner of the mansion must be the butler or the gardener. I took the glass. I did not correct him. I wanted to see how far they would go. Paige swept over, laughing at something a woman with a diamond choker had said. She wrapped an arm around my shoulders. It felt like a snake coiling before a strike. "Oh, don't mind him," she told the group. "This is Solomon. He gets a little confused sometimes." The man in the linen suit looked embarrassed for a second, then laughed. "Oh, I am so sorry. I thought he was staff." "It is an honest mistake," Paige said, patting my cheek. "He is a retired truck driver. He spent 40 years in a cab hauling freight. He is just lucky his son is such a success. Tyrone takes such good care of him. The disrespect was physical. It felt like a slap. She was rewriting history in real time, erasing my empire, erasing the $50 million company I built from the ground up, and reducing me to a charity case living off my son's generosity. Tyrone, who was currently standing by the bar drinking whiskey at 10 in the morning and avoiding my gaze, had never paid a mortgage bill in his life. But I stayed silent. I let them laugh. I let them believe I was the lucky old truck driver who hit the lottery of having a benevolent white daughter-in-law. Let them underestimate me. It made them careless. Lunch was served on the terrace. The caterers brought out bowls of lobster bisque, a rich red creamy soup that smelled of sherry and butter. I sat at the end of the long table. The guests were seated according to a hierarchy only Paige understood. Beatrice sat at the other end playing the role of the grand matriarch, soaking up the compliments on a house she had never lifted a finger to maintain. The conversation flowed around me. They talked about summer homes in the Hamptons. They talked about art auctions. They talked about the burden of inheritance taxes. I ate my soup slowly, my hand trembling slightly, not because of age, but because I was holding back the urge to flip the table. Then Paige stood up. She tapped her glass with a spoon. "Everyone listen up," she announced. "We have to make sure Dad is comfortable. You know how spills can happen at his age." She reached under the table and pulled out something that made the guests titter with amusement. It was a bib, not a napkin. A plastic bib with a picture of a cartoon lobster on the front. It was something you would put on a toddler. She walked over to me. The guests watched a mixture of pity and mockery on their faces. "Here we go, Dad," she said, unfolding the plastic. "We do not want you ruining that nice sweater. It is one of the few good ones you have." She moved to tie it around my neck. This was it, the line in the sand. She wasn't just protecting my clothes. She was marking her territory. She was showing these people and showing me that she was in charge. She was infantilizing me, stripping away my dignity layer by layer until there was nothing left but a drooling, dependent old man. I felt the cold plastic against my neck. I felt her fingers fumbling with the tie at the back of my head. The guests were chuckling now, a soft, cruel sound. "He looks adorable," the woman with the diamond choker said. I looked at Tyrone. My son. He was looking at his plate, his face red. He knew this was wrong. He knew I was a man of pride. But he said nothing. He let his wife tie a plastic lobster around his father's neck because he was too weak to stop her. I did not fight her. I did not push her hands away. I let her tie the knot. I let her smooth the plastic over my chest. "There," she said, stepping back to admire her work. "Now, you are safe." I looked up at her. I locked eyes with her. I let the mask of the senile old man slip just for a fraction of a second. I let her see the Marine. I let her see the CEO. I let her see the man who had fired executives for less disrespect than this. I smiled. It was a cold, sharp smile. "Thank you, Paige," I said, my voice clear and steady, cutting through the laughter. "This bib fits a liar better than it fits me, don't you think?" The laughter died instantly. The silence that followed was absolute. Paige froze. Her hand hovered in the air halfway back to her wine glass. Her smile faltered. "What did you say?" she whispered. I picked up my spoon. I pretended to be confused again, letting the mask slide back into place. "I said the lobster," I mumbled, returning to my shaky old man voice. "It is a messy eater, just like a liar. Messy." I took a sip of soup. The guests laughed nervously, unsure if I was making a joke or if I was simply rambling. But Paige knew. I saw the color drain from her face. She looked at me with a new expression. Fear. She realized in that moment that the old man might not be as asleep as she thought. She realized I was watching her. She sat down quickly, drinking deeply from her wine glass. She tried to restart the conversation, but the energy had shifted. She kept glancing at me, checking if the mask had slipped again. I finished my soup. I took off the bib and wiped my mouth. "I am tired," I announced, standing up. "All this excitement. I need to walk in the garden." "Of course," Beatrice said quickly, eager to get me away from the guests. "Go rest, Solomon. Do not wander too far." I walked away from the terrace, my back straight, until I was out of their sight. I headed toward the rose garden at the back of the property. It was secluded, hidden by high hedges. I walked past the roses, past the fountain, until I reached the old potting shed. It was the one place on the estate Paige never went because she hated the smell of fertilizer. I stepped inside and closed the door. I pulled out my burner phone. My hands were steady now. The rage had focused into a cold, hard point. I dialed a number I had memorized 30 years ago. Abraham O'Malley picked up on the first ring. "I am here, Solomon. Are you safe?" "I am safe," I said, "but the situation has escalated. They are moving fast." "Abe," Paige brought a lawyer to the party. I saw him in the corner. "They are preparing the paperwork. I know," O'Malley said. "I have been monitoring the chatter. But Solomon, I found something worse. Worse than the surrogacy contract," I asked. "Worse than the theft." "Yes. You asked me to initiate Protocol Ghost. You asked me to look at Tyrone S. Company." I held my breath. Tyrone played the part of the venture capitalist. I knew he was bad at business, but I assumed he was just losing money, not doing anything illegal. "What did you find, Abe?" "Solomon Tyrone S. firm is a shell. There are no investments. There are no startups. The only money moving through those accounts is coming from offshore entities linked to organized crime syndicates in Eastern Europe. He is laundering money, Solomon. Massive amounts." I leaned against the workbench. My son was not just a failure. He was a criminal, a pawn in a game much bigger and more dangerous than I had imagined. "And Beatrice?" I asked, dreading the answer. "She is not just a bystander, Malley said, his voice heavy with regret. "She is listed as the chief financial officer. Her signature is on every transfer. She is the one structuring the deals. She is the one washing the money." The phone felt heavy in my hand. Beatrice, my wife, the woman I had shared a bed with for 40 years. She wasn't just greedy. She was the architect. She was using my reputation, my name, and the infrastructure of the logistics empire I built to clean dirty money. "And Paige?" I asked. "Paige is the recruiter," O'Malley said. "She brings in the clients. That is why she needs control of your estate so badly. The lenders are calling in their debts. If they don't pay up by the end of the month, they are dead, literally dead, Solomon." "So they need me to die," I said. "Or they need me declared incompetent so they can liquidate my assets to save their own skins." "Exactly, Malley said. "They are desperate. And desperate people are dangerous. You need to get out of there." "No," I said. "If I leave now, they will run. They will disappear and leave me with the wreckage. I need to trap them. I need to catch them in the act. I have a plan, Abe, but I need you to do something for me. Name it. Find out everything you can about Dr. Fletcher. If he is helping them with the medical side, he is the weak link. Doctors have licenses to lose. They have reputations. Squeeze him." "Consider it done," O'Malley said. "And Solomon, watch your back." "Beatrice is not the woman you married." "I know," I said. "That woman died a long time ago." I hung up the phone. I stood in the dark shed surrounded by the smell of earth and rust. I looked at my hands. They were the hands of a man who had built a kingdom, and now they would be the hands of a man who dismantled it. I walked back to the house. The party was winding down. I saw Paige saying goodbye to her guests, her fake smile plastered on her face. I saw Tyrone slumped in a chair, defeated by the alcohol. I saw Beatrice counting the leftover wine bottles, calculating the cost. They looked like a family, but they were vipers in a pit. I walked up to Paige. She flinched when she saw me. "Did you have a nice walk, Dad?" she asked, her voice tight. "Very nice," I said. "I remembered something while I was out there." "What is that?" she asked warily. "I remembered that liars always get caught," I said softly. "Eventually." She stared at me, her eyes wide. I patted her shoulder and walked past her into the house. I went up to my room. I had work to do. Tonight, Beatrice would come for the signature. Tonight, I would face the woman who had sold my soul for money. And tonight, I would show her that Solomon Banks was not a victim. I sat in my chair facing the door. I waited for the sun to set. I waited for the shadows to lengthen. The game had changed. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about survival, and I intended to survive. The grandfather clock in the hallway struck 2 a.m, sending deep vibrations through the floorboards of the silent house. I sat in the high-backed leather chair of my study, shrouded in darkness. This room had been my command center for 40 years. It was where I negotiated the contracts that built Banks Logistics from a single delivery truck into an empire. It was where I smoked cigars with senators and union leaders. And tonight it was where I waited for my wife. I knew she would come. After the disaster with the iPad and the failed hacking attempt, Beatrice would be desperate. She needed authority. She needed a legal weapon that could bypass biometric security and encryption. She needed the corporate seal and my personal signature. I heard the soft click of the door handle. It was a sound I had anticipated. I kept my breathing shallow, my body still. The door creaked open, pushing a wedge of hallway light across the Persian rug. Beatrice stepped inside. She was wearing her silk robe tied tightly around her waist. She held a small flashlight in one hand and a sheaf of papers in the other. She did not turn on the overhead lights. She moved with the stealth of a thief creeping toward the heavy mahogany desk where I sat facing the window. She thought the chair was empty. She thought I was upstairs drooling into my pillow courtesy of the sedative she believed I had consumed. She reached the desk. She set the papers down and began to open the top drawer, her fingers searching for the heavy brass stamp that bore my legal seal. I waited until her hand was inside the drawer. Then I spun the chair around. "Hello, Beatrice," I said, my voice low and rough like gravel in a mixer. "Looking for something." Beatrice gasped. She dropped the flashlight. It clattered onto the desk, the beam spinning wildly before settling on my face. She jumped back, clutching her chest, her eyes wide with terror. "Solomon," she breathed. "You scared me to death. What are you doing down here in the dark?" I leaned forward into the light. "I could ask you the same thing I said. It is 2 a.m. Why are you going through my desk?" She recovered quickly. I give her credit for that. Beatrice had always been quick on her feet, a trait that made her an excellent chief financial officer for a money laundering operation, as I had recently learned. She smoothed her hair, her face shifting from fear to a mask of weary concern. I heard a noise. She lied effortlessly. "I thought maybe you had wandered downstairs. You know how confused you have been lately, Solomon. I was worried you might hurt yourself." I looked at the papers she had placed on the desk. And the documents. "Beatrice, did you bring legal paperwork to protect me from tripping in the dark?" She froze for a split second, then let out a soft, sad laugh. She picked up the papers and held them to her chest like a shield. "Oh, these," she said. "I was just organizing things. I found them on the kitchen counter. I thought I should put them away in the safe. I did not want to lose them." She walked around the desk, invading my personal space. She placed a hand on my shoulder. It felt heavy, suffocating. "You should be in bed, Solomon," she murmured. "You had surgery today. You need rest. Why are you punishing yourself?" "I am not the one being punished, Beatrice," I said, looking at her hand on my shoulder. "Not yet, anyway." She pulled her hand away as if she had been burned. She sensed the hostility. She sensed that the old Solomon, the one who doted on her and bought her diamonds, was gone. But she did not know why. She thought it was the pain or the medication. She did not know I had seen the surrogacy contract. She did not know I had spoken to O'Malley. She decided to pivot. She moved to the chair opposite me and sat down, placing the papers between us. She looked at me with tears welling in her eyes. "A masterful performance. Solomon, we need to talk," she said, her voice trembling. "I did not want to bring this up while you were recovering, but we have a problem. A financial problem." I raised an eyebrow. "Do we?" "Yes," she said. "The insurance company. They are refusing to cover the surgery. They are claiming it was elective. And there are some tax issues with the estate planning. The accounts are frozen, Solomon. Lies. All lies. My accounts were locked because I locked them. And the surgery was paid for in cash months ago. So what do you need?" I asked, playing along. She pushed the papers across the desk. "I need you to sign these," she said. "It is just an application for medical subsidy and a temporary authorization for me to speak to the IRS on your behalf. It will unfreeze the accounts so we can pay the bills. It is just a formality, darling." I looked at the document. The header was folded over, obscured by a paperclip. But I recognized the dense legal formatting. I reached out and slid the paper closer. I did not need to read the fine print to know what it was. It was a durable power of attorney. It granted Beatrice Banks full and unrestricted authority over my assets, my medical decisions, and my legal affairs. If I signed this, she could sell the house, liquidate the company, and put me in a state-run facility all before breakfast. She handed me a pen. It was my favorite Mont Blanc, the one she had given me for our 25th anniversary. "Just sign at the bottom," she whispered. "Then we can go back to bed. We can go back to how things were." I held the pen. I looked at her. I looked at the woman I had shared my life with for 40 years. I saw the lines around her eyes, the way her mouth turned down slightly at the corners. I remembered the day we met. She was a waitress at a diner on the South Side. I was a young man with one truck and a lot of ambition. I remembered the way she looked at me then like I was the only man in the world, and now she was looking at me like I was a signature, a hurdle. 40 years, Beatrice, I said softly. We built a life. We built a home. Yes, she said eagerly, leaning forward. And we have so much more time, Solomon. Just sign the paper. Let me take care of the burden. You have worked hard enough. Let me carry the load now. She was using our history as a weapon. She was weaponizing my trust. She wanted me to believe that this was an act of love, not a coup. I looked down at the signature line. You know, I said I have been thinking a lot about the past tonight, about the beginning. Beatrice smiled a tight, impatient smile. That is nice, darling. But please sign. My hands are shaking. I am so tired. I ignored her. I was thinking about 1983, I said. The smile vanished from her face. Her skin, which had been flushed with the anticipation of victory, turned the color of ash. 1983, she whispered. Why would you think about that? It was a hard year. I continued twirling the pen in my fingers. We were struggling. The business was just starting to take off, but cash was tight. I was on the road 5 days a week. You were home alone a lot. Solomon, please, she said, her voice thin and high. This is not the time for nostalgia. Sign the paper. I remember coming home early one week. I said, my voice hardening. I wanted to surprise you, but you were not home. The neighbors said you had gone to the clinic. Beatrice stood up. Her chair scraped loudly against the floor. Stop it, she hissed. Stop it right now. I did not stop. I went to the clinic, I said. I found the doctor. He told me you had been there. He told me about the procedure. I looked up at her. Her eyes were wide, filled with a terror that had nothing to do with money. He told me you were pregnant, Beatrice, and he told me you terminated it. She was shaking now, vibrating with the force of the secret coming to light. We could not afford a baby, she screamed. We were poor, Solomon. You were never there. I did it for us. That is what you told yourself, I said. But that is not what the doctor told me. He told me the dates didn't match up. He told me the conception date was during the week I was in Detroit. The silence that fell over the room was heavy enough to crush bones. I knew Beatrice. I knew back then. I knew about the man from the grocery store. I knew about the affair. And I knew that child wasn't mine. She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. But I never said a word. I continued, my voice dropping to a whisper. I buried it. I swallowed that pain because I loved you. I forgave you without you ever asking. I raised Tyrone as my own, even though we adopted him later to fill the void that abortion left. I gave you everything. My name, my money, my loyalty. I looked down at the paper again. And this is how you repay me. By trying to steal what is left of my life. By stealing my DNA to cover up the sterility of the son we raised together. I put the tip of the pen to the paper. You want a signature? I asked. I will give you a signature. I wrote in bold, angry strokes. I did not sign my name. I wrote a sequence of numbers. 19-08-1983. August 19th, 1983. The date she walked out of that clinic. The date she killed the evidence of her infidelity. The date the lie of our marriage truly began. I capped the pen and tossed it onto the desk. It spun and came to a rest, pointing at her like an accusing finger. There, I said. Take it. That is all you are getting from me. Beatrice looked at the numbers. She looked at me. The mask of the loving wife dissolved completely. In its place was a visage of pure hatred and fear. She snatched the paper from the desk, crumpling it in her fist. You old fool, she spat. You think you know everything. You know nothing. You are going to die alone in this house, Solomon. And when you do, I will be the one laughing. Get out, I said. Get out of my office. She turned and ran. She did not walk, she fled. She ran out of the room, and I heard her footsteps pounding up the stairs. She was running from the truth. She was running from the ghost of 1983. I sat alone in the dark office, my heart racing, my chest tight. I had played my card. I had revealed that I knew her darkest secret. I had broken the stalemate. But I knew this wasn't over. I had cornered a rat, and rats bite when they are cornered. Beatrice would go back to Paige and Tyrone. She would tell them I was lucid. She would tell them I was hostile. They wouldn't try to trick me again. The time for papers and signatures was over. Now they would come for me with force. I opened the bottom drawer of my desk. I reached into the back behind the hanging files. My fingers closed around the cold steel of the panic button I had installed 10 years ago. I did not press it yet. Not yet. I needed them to make the next move. I needed them to commit a crime so undeniable that not even the best lawyer could save them. I swiveled my chair back toward the window. I watched the moon rising over the trees. "Come on," I whispered to the empty room. "Make your move. I am ready." The silence in the house after Beatrice fled my study was heavy, but I knew it would not last. I sat in the darkness of my office, listening to the frantic whispers drifting down from the second floor. They were regrouping. The rat had run back to the nest, and now the vipers were coiling together. I checked my watch. It was 3 a.m. They had tried stealth. They had tried legal trickery. Now they would try force. They had no other choice. I had revealed my hand. I had shown them that I was lucid, that I knew their secrets, and that I was not going to sign away my empire. To them, I was now a dangerous liability that had to be neutralized immediately. I did not have to wait long to find out their next move. I heard Paige's voice, shrill and theatrical, echoing from the hallway upstairs. "He has a gun!" she screamed into her phone. "Please hurry, he is having a psychotic break. He thinks he is back in the war. He is threatening to kill us all." I shook my head slowly. It was a classic move. The 911 call. They were going to SWAT me. They wanted the police to burst in, find a confused old black man with a weapon, and either shoot me or drag me off to a psychiatric ward in handcuffs. It was a nuclear option. It was dangerous, reckless, and exactly the kind of plan Paige would cook up when she was cornered. I stood up and walked calmly out of the study. I did not run. I did not hide. I walked up the stairs, my steps heavy and deliberate. I needed to be exactly where they expected me to be. I entered my bedroom. The room was still a mess from their earlier search. The drawers were open-closed, scattered on the floor. It set the perfect stage for their narrative of a chaotic mental breakdown. I walked over to the bed. I lifted the pillow. There it was, a snub-nosed .38 special. It was not mine. I had never owned a revolver like this. It was a throwdown piece, probably bought on the street by Tyrone-esque criminal contacts. It was loaded the cold steel heavy with the promise of violence. They had planted it there while I was downstairs confronting Beatrice. They expected me to come to bed, find it, maybe pick it up in confusion just as the police arrived. Or maybe they just needed it to be there when the cops searched the room. I picked up the gun. I checked the cylinder. Full. I walked to the window and looked out. In the distance, I could already hear the wail of sirens cutting through the night air. They were coming fast. I did not panic. I did not flush the gun down the toilet. That would leave them with no evidence, but it would also leave me in a he said, she said situation. I needed to humiliate them. I needed to prove not just my innocence, but their malice. I opened the secret compartment in the base of my nightstand. Inside, among my emergency cash and passports, was a 3D printed replica of a handgun. I had confiscated it from my grandson years ago before he moved away, a realistic toy he had used for a film project. It looked exactly like a real firearm, painted matte black with a weighted grip, but the barrel was solid plastic. I swapped them. I put the real .38 into the secret compartment and locked it. I placed the plastic toy under the pillow exactly where they had left the real one. Then I sat on the edge of the bed. I folded my hands in my lap. I waited. The sirens grew louder, turning into a deafening scream that filled the driveway. Blue and red lights flashed against the bedroom walls, painting the room in a strobe of chaotic color. I heard tires screeching on the asphalt, car doors slamming, heavy boots pounding on the porch. Police open up. I heard the front door crash open. They did not wait for an answer. Paige must have told them I was actively violent. I heard them storming up the stairs, a tactical team moving with speed and aggression. Paige was screaming in the hallway. "He is in the bedroom. Be careful. He said he would shoot anyone who came through that door." She was trying to get me killed. She was trying to trigger a lethal response from the officers. The bedroom door kicked open. 3 officers burst in, weapons drawn. The lights from their tactical rails blinded me. "Police, show me your hands. Show me your hands right now." I raised my hands slowly, palms open, fingers spread. I did not make any sudden movements. I sat perfectly still, my face calm, my breathing steady. "I am unarmed officer," I said, my voice clear and level. "I am sitting on my bed. There is no threat here. Get on the ground. Do it now." I slowly lowered myself from the bed to the floor. I lay on my stomach, hands behind my head. I let them cuff me. I felt the cold metal bite into my wrists. I felt the knee of a young officer in the small of my back. It was humiliating, but it was necessary. I needed to be the victim in this scenario. The officers cleared the room, checking the closet, checking under the bed. Clear One shouted. They hauled me to my feet. They pushed me toward the wall. Paige, Tyrone, and Beatrice appeared in the doorway. They were huddled together, putting on the performance of a lifetime. Beatrice was sobbing into a handkerchief. Tyrone looked pale and shaken. Paige was trembling, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Oh, thank God," she cried. He was talking crazy. He said the government was stealing his thoughts. He said he had to purge the house. She looked at the officer in charge, a sergeant I did not recognize. "He has a gun," she sobbed. "He keeps it under his pillow. He showed it to me. He said he was going to use it on us." The sergeant looked at me. His eyes were hard, unforgiving. "Is there a weapon in the room, Mr. Banks?" I looked at Paige. I saw the triumph in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought the gun would seal my fate. "My daughter-in-law seems to think so," I said calmly. "Why don't you check?" The sergeant nodded to one of his men. "Check the pillow." The young officer holstered his weapon and walked to the bed. He lifted the pillow. "Gun," he shouted, grabbing the black object. Paige let out a dramatic gasp. "See, I told you. He is dangerous. You have to take him away. He is not safe." The officer turned, holding the gun up. The sergeant stepped forward to inspect it. He reached out and took the weapon. He felt the weight. He looked at the barrel. He frowned. He racked the slide, or tried to. It was a solid piece of plastic. The sergeant looked at the gun, then at Paige, then at me. "What is this?" he asked, holding up the toy. Paige's eyes bulged. "That is his gun." He pointed it at me. "It is a toy, Mom," the sergeant said, his voice flat. "It is a piece of plastic." "No," Paige shrieked. "That is impossible." "It was real. I saw it. It was heavy. It was loaded." "You saw it?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. "I thought you said I showed it to you. Did you hold it, Paige?" "Did you check if it was loaded?" She froze, realizing her mistake. She stammered, "I mean, it looked real. He said it was real." The sergeant looked at the toy again. He looked at me. He looked at the handcuffs on my wrists. He seemed confused. The narrative he had been fed was falling apart. Just then, a heavy set of footsteps came up the stairs. A booming voice filled the hallway. "What the hell is going on here? Why are there 6 units on my lawn?" It was Captain Jackson, the precinct commander. He walked into the room, his uniform impeccable, his presence commanding. He took in the scene, the cuffed old man, the hysterical family, the confused sergeant holding a toy gun. Then he looked at my face. He stopped. His eyes widened. He took a step closer, squinting through the strobe lights. "Solomon," he said. "Solomon Banks." "Hello, Marcus," I said, using his first name. "It has been a long time." Captain Jackson looked at the sergeant. "Get those cuffs off him. Now." "But sir," the sergeant stammered. "The call said he was armed and psychotic. I said, get them off," Jackson roared. The sergeant scrambled to unlock the cuffs. I rubbed my wrists. Jackson walked over and grabbed my hand, shaking it firmly. He looked at me with a mixture of respect and concern. This was the man I had pulled out of a burning Humvee in the desert 30 years ago. I was his sergeant then. I had carried him 2 miles to the evac zone while he bled from a shrapnel wound. He knew who I was. He knew I didn't suffer from delusions. And he knew I didn't play with toy guns. "What is this?" Solomon Jackson asked, gesturing to the room. I looked at Paige. She was backing away, her face the color of chalk. Tyrone was looking at the floor. Beatrice had stopped crying. "It seems my family is worried about my health," I said dryly. "They seem to think I am losing my mind. They called you here because they claim I threatened them with a weapon." I gestured to the toy in the sergeant's hand. "My daughter-in-law says I keep that under my pillow to shoot aliens or government spies, depending on which version of the lie she is telling." Jackson took the toy from the sergeant. He looked at it, then looked at Paige. "You called in a code 3 for a toy gun," he asked, his voice dangerously low. "It wasn't a toy," Paige stammered, desperate to salvage the plan. "He switched it. He must have switched it. There was a real gun." "He is crazy, I tell you. He is trying to trick you." Jackson stepped into her personal space. He was a big man, and when he was angry, he was terrifying. "Mrs. Banks, Do you know who this man is? He is my father-in-law. Paige said, her voice shrinking. He is a sick old man. This man, Jackson said, pointing at me, is a decorated war hero. He is a pillar of this community, and he is the most sane person I know. If he wanted you dead, you would not have had time to call 911. He turned to the sergeant. Did you find any other weapons? No, sir, just the toy. Jackson turned back to Paige. Filing a false police report is a felony, Mrs. Banks. Swatting your own father-in-law because of a domestic dispute is a crime. I am not lying, she screamed. He is manipulating you. He is the one who called you, isn't he? He is using his connections. I did not call anyone, I said quietly. You called them, Paige. You invited them into my home. And now they are here seeing exactly what you are. Jackson looked at me. Do you want to press charges, Solomon? I looked at them. The three of them huddled together, stripped of their power, exposed as liars and fools. Not tonight, Marcus, I said. I think you have scared them enough. But I want a report filed. I want it on the record that they called the police with a false claim of a weapon. I want it documented that they tried to have me committed. Done, Jackson said. He turned to the officers. Pack up. We are leaving. He looked at Paige one last time. If I get another call to this address and it is not a genuine emergency, I will arrest you myself. Do you understand me? Paige nodded, unable to speak. Jackson shook my hand again. Call me Solomon. If you need anything, I will, I said. Thank you, Marcus. The police left. The sirens faded. The house fell silent again. I stood in the middle of my bedroom, rubbing my wrists. I looked at my family. They were terrified. Their plan had blown up in their faces. They had tried to use the law against me, and the law had saluted me. Get out, I said softly. They didn't move. I said, get out, I roared, my voice filling the room. Get out of my sight before I change my mind and have Jackson turn the car around. They ran. They scrambled out of the room, tripping over each other in their haste. I closed the door. I locked it. I walked to the nightstand and opened the secret compartment. I took out the real gun. I held it for a moment, feeling its weight. They were desperate now. They had tried fraud. They had tried force. Both had failed. They would not stop. I knew that. Paige was too deep in debt. Tyrone was too weak to turn back. And Beatrice, she was too proud to lose. They would regroup. They would come up with something else. Something nastier. But I had bought myself time, and I had established a record. I sat down on the bed. My adrenaline was fading, leaving me exhausted, but I could not sleep. Not yet. I picked up the toy gun. I looked at it and smiled. Plastic. Just like them. Hollow and cheap. Tomorrow the real war would begin. Tomorrow I would take the fight to them. I would hit them where it hurt. I would hit their reputation. I would hit their pride. I put the toy on the nightstand, a trophy of the battle I had just won. I lay down staring at the ceiling. Your move, Paige, I whispered. Your move. The morning sun filtered through the dining room windows, illuminating a family tableau that looked normal on the surface but was rotting from the inside. After the disaster with the police, Paige and Tyrone had retreated to their corners, licking their wounds, but I knew they would not stay down for long. Desperation is a powerful fuel, and they were running on empty. I sat at the head of the table, drinking black coffee, watching them. Paige was picking at a grapefruit, her face pale and drawn. Tyrone was staring into his phone, his leg bouncing nervously. Beatrice was pacing the kitchen. Then Paige made her move. She put down her spoon and looked at me. Her eyes filled with tears, instantly a skill she must have honed in drama school. Dad, she said, her voice trembling. I did not want to tell you like this, not after everything that happened last night. But maybe this will change things. Maybe this will help us heal. She reached into her purse and pulled out a glossy black and white photograph. She slid it across the mahogany table toward me. It was an ultrasound, a grainy image of a fetus curled in the womb. I am pregnant, she whispered. You are going to be a grandfather. The room went silent. Tyrone looked up, his mouth hanging open. He looked genuinely surprised, which told me this was Paige's solo play. Beatrice stopped pacing. She clasped her hands together, her face transforming into a mask of pure grandmotherly joy. Oh, Paige, she cried, rushing over to hug her. A baby, a Banks baby. This is exactly what we needed. I looked at the photo. I looked at the date stamp in the corner. It was from yesterday. But yesterday, Paige had been busy trying to get me arrested. Yesterday, she had been screaming about guns and psychosis. And more importantly, I had seen the surrogacy contract. I knew Tyrone was sterile. I knew they needed my DNA to make a baby. And I knew for a fact that the sample Dr. Fletcher stole from me had not been used yet because the ink on the contract was barely dry. This was a lie, a biological impossibility. But they did not know that I knew. Beatrice turned to me, her eyes shining with predatory excitement. "Solomon, do you hear that? A grandson, an heir. This changes everything. We have to secure his future." "Here it comes," I thought. "We need to settle the estate," Paige said, wiping her eyes. "We cannot bring a baby into this instability. We need to know he has a home, a legacy." Beatrice nodded vigorously. "You need to sign over the house, Solomon, and the trust. Put it in Tyrone's name today. For the baby. Do not let your pride punish an innocent child." They were weaponizing a fetus that did not exist. They were using the promise of immortality, the one thing every old man is supposed to crave, to pry the keys to my kingdom from my hands. I picked up the photo. I held it with trembling hands, playing the part of the emotional old fool. "A baby," I murmured. "My grandson." "Yes, Dad," Tyrone said, jumping onto the bandwagon. "Your flesh and blood. The future of the bank's name." I looked at Tyrone, my sterile son. He was lying to my face about his own potency. The shame he must feel buried under layers of greed was unimaginable. "This is wonderful news," I said, my voice cracking. "Wonderful!" I stood up. I walked over to Paige and kissed her forehead. "You are right," I said. "We need to secure his future. I cannot leave my grandson with nothing." Paige smiled. It was the smile of a hunter who just felt the trap snap shut. "So, you will sign?" she asked. "You will sign the house over." "I will do better than that," I said. "I want to celebrate. I want to announce this to the world." I looked at them, scanning their faces. "We will host a party. A gender reveal party. Here at the mansion, next Saturday. Invite everyone. Your friends, the business partners. Everyone." But Dad, Paige started looking nervous. "Why wait? We can sign the papers now." "No," I insisted, slamming my hand on the table. "A bank's heir deserves a royal welcome. I will sign the deed and the transfer of the trust fund on stage the moment the confetti flies. It will be my gift to the new generation." Beatrice looked at Paige. I could see them calculating. A week was a long time, but the prize was the entire estate publicly transferred. It was worth the wait. "Okay, Dad," Paige said. "A party, next Saturday." "Good," I said. "Now if you will excuse me, I have to make some calls. I want this to be perfect." I walked out of the dining room, leaving them to celebrate their victory. I walked straight to the potting shed, my sanctuary. I locked the door. I pulled out the burner phone. I dialed O'Malley. "Abe," I said. "It is me." "Solomon, I heard about the police raid," O'Malley said. "Are you all right?" "I am fine," I said. "But we have a new problem. Paige is pregnant." "That is impossible," O'Malley said. "We know Tyrone is sterile, and we know the surrogacy paperwork has not been filed." "Exactly," I said. "It is a fake, a Hail Mary pass. She showed me an ultrasound today. She wants me to sign over the house before the baby is born." "What are you going to do?" Abe asked. "I am throwing a party," I said. "A gender reveal, next Saturday. I promise to sign everything then." "You are buying time." "I am buying a massacre," I said coldly. "Abe, I need you to do something. You know the clinic Paige goes to, the one Dr. Fletcher is affiliated with, Serenity Fertility Center. I know it. Buy it," I said. Silence on the line. "Buy the clinic?" O'Malley asked. "Yes," I said. "I want 51% controlling interest. I want it done by Monday morning." "Use the shell company in the Caymans. Price is no object. Offer them double the market value if you have to. Just get me the keys to the digital archives. Solomon, that will cost millions." "I have millions," Abe, I snapped. "And right now I am willing to spend every dime to burn this lie to the ground. Just do it." "Done," O'Malley said. "I will have the papers ready." I hung up. I sat in the shed, smelling the fertilizer and the dust. I looked at the garden shears hanging on the wall. Sharp, deadly. They wanted a show. I would give them a show. By Tuesday afternoon, I owned the Serenity Fertility Center. O'Malley worked miracles when he had an unlimited budget. He sent me a secure link to a digital dossier via an encrypted app. I sat in my study with the door locked and opened the file. What I found made the hair on my arms stand up. First, the patient records for Paige Banks. There was no pregnancy. Her HCG levels were 0. The ultrasound she showed me was a stock image downloaded from a medical archives site. But there was a purchase order, an invoice from a theatrical supply company in Los Angeles dated 3 days ago. Item: prosthetic pregnancy belly, trimester 1 to 3 kit, silicone, realistic skin tone, rush delivery. She was going to fake the whole thing. She was going to wear a rubber stomach for 9 months, waddling around my house demanding sympathy and money, and then what? Fake a miscarriage, or buy a baby on the black market. The depth of her deception was bottomless. But as I scrolled down, I found something even darker, something that shifted my anger from Paige to the man I trusted with my health. Dr. Fletcher S.'s personal log files were on the server. He was arrogant, stupid, and careless. He kept notes on his side deals. Entry 402, donor specimen Banks Esner, high motility, genetic profile excellent, sold to private buyer in Dubai for $200,000. I stopped breathing. He had sold me. He had sold my legacy to a stranger halfway across the world. But the next line was the kicker, the punchline to a joke I did not know I was in. Entry 403, replacement specimen for Banks protocol, source John Doe, homeless male recruited from downtown shelter, medical history unknown, comp $50. Note: Paige Banks requested rush IVF. If she proceeds, she gets the homeless sample. She will never know the difference. I laughed, a dry, rasping sound that hurt my chest. Paige thought she was stealing a dynasty. She thought she was stealing the genetic code of a self-made millionaire to breed a designer baby. But Dr. Fletcher, the man she conspired with, had betrayed her. He had sold the gold and replaced it with lead. If she actually went through with the procedure using the sample she thought was mine, she would be carrying the child of a stranger paid $50 off the street. The vipers were biting each other. I downloaded every file. I backed them up to 3 different servers. This was it. This was the ammunition I needed. I didn't just have a smoking gun. I had a nuclear warhead. I walked out of the study. I found Paige in the living room looking at swatches for the nursery. She was humming to herself, holding a piece of yellow fabric against the light. "That is a lovely color, Paige," I said. She jumped slightly, then smiled. "Thanks, Dad. I want everything to be neutral. We do not want to spoil the surprise, do we?" "No," I said, smiling back. "We certainly do not." I looked at her stomach. Flat, empty, a vessel for lies. "I cannot wait for Saturday," I said. "It is going to be a day none of us will ever forget." I walked away, leaving her to her fabric and her fantasies. I went to the garage. I needed to check on my old truck. I needed to remind myself of where I came from, because on Saturday I was going to remind them too. I was Solomon Banks. I hauled steel across the Rockies in blinding snowstorms. I built a fortune with grit and sweat, and I was not going to let a woman wearing a rubber belly and a son with no spine take it away from me. The party was set. The guests were invited. The trap was laid. And I was the one holding the detonator. The ballroom was a sea of white linen and crystal. Paige had spared no expense spending my money as if it were infinite. She had hired a string quartet. She had flown in orchids from Thailand. She had invited every socialite and business rival she could find. This was not a party. It was a coronation. And I was the old king being led to the guillotine. I stood near the stage, dressed in my tuxedo, watching them. Tyrone was circulating, shaking hands, his face flushed with triumph and expensive scotch. Beatrice was holding court near the buffet, accepting congratulations on her impending grandmotherhood. And Paige was glowing radiant in a flowing gown that artfully concealed her non-existent baby bump. She touched her stomach frequently, a gesture so practiced it looked natural. The music swelled, the lights dimmed. A spotlight hit the stage. Tyrone stepped up to the microphone. He adjusted his tie. He looked out at the crowd, at the people who had ignored him for years, and he smiled. It was the smile of the man who finally believed he had won. "Thank you all for coming," he boomed, his voice echoing off the vaulted ceiling. "Tonight is a night of celebration, not just for the new life joining our family, but for the legacy that makes it possible." He gestured to me. The spotlight swung, blinding me for a moment. "My father, Solomon Banks, built this empire with his bare hands," he said, "but every king must one day rest. Every builder must one day lay down his tools. He paused for dramatic effect. Today, my father officially steps down. Today he passes the torch. To me. To his grandson. To the future. The crowd applauded. Polite, respectful applause. They did not know the truth. They did not know they were clapping for a thief. Tyrone reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a gold pen. It glinted under the lights. He pulled a leather folder from the podium. "Dad," he said, beckoning me. "Come up here. Let's make it official. Let's sign the transfer. Let's give this baby his birthright." The pressure was palpable. Hundreds of eyes were on me. Cameras were flashing. If I refused now, I would look like a stubborn old fool ruining a family moment. It was a perfect trap. Public pressure combined with emotional blackmail. I walked up the stairs. My steps were slow measured. I did not look at Tyrone. I looked at the crowd. I saw the faces of men I had done business with for decades. I saw the faces of strangers who only cared about the open bar. I reached the podium. Tyrone handed me the pen. He was sweating. I could smell his fear beneath the cologne. He knew this was the moment, the point of no return. "Sign it, Pops," he whispered, so only I could hear. "Sign it and you can go back to your garden. We will take care of everything." I took the pen. I felt the weight of it. I looked at the document. It was all there. The irrevocable trust, the deed to the house, the controlling shares of Banks Logistics. One signature and I would be a guest in my own life. I leaned toward the microphone. The feedback whined slightly, then settled. "Thank you, son," I said, my voice steady and deep. "This is indeed a momentous occasion, a transfer of power, a new beginning." I looked at Paige standing in the front row, her hands clasped over her fake belly, her eyes shining with greed. "But before I sign," I continued, "I think we should honor the mother of this child, the woman who made this all possible." Paige beamed. She stepped forward, ready to accept her praise. "I have a gift for you, Paige," I said. "A special presentation, something to commemorate the love that brought us here." I pointed to the massive LED screen behind me. It was displaying a loop of ultrasound images, the stock photos she had downloaded. "If you would indulge an old man," I said, "I put together a little video. A tribute." Tyrone frowned. This wasn't in the script. "Dad, we can do that later. Just sign the papers." "No," I said, my voice hardening. "We do it now." I pulled a small remote from my pocket. It was the same remote I used for boardroom presentations. I pressed the play button. The ultrasound images vanished. The screen went black for a second. The room went silent. Then a video appeared. It was grainy, taken from a hidden camera angle. It showed the living room of my house. The timestamp in the corner read 3 days ago. Paige was there pacing back and forth, a glass of wine in her hand. Tyrone was sitting on the sofa, his head in his hands. The audio was crisp and clear thanks to the high-fidelity microphones I had installed. "I am sick of this," Tyrone Paige's voice boomed through the ballroom speakers. "I am sick of waiting. I am sick of pretending to be nice to that old fossil." The crowd gasped. A ripple of shock went through the room. Tyrone froze on stage. He looked at the screen, then at me, his eyes wide with horror. On the screen, Tyrone looked up. "We just have to be patient, Paige. He will sign. He loves me." "Loves you?" Paige laughed. It was a cruel, mocking sound. "He pities you, Tyrone. He knows you are weak. He knows you are useless. That is why he never gave you the company." Paige in the front row turned white. She looked around looking for a way out, but she was trapped by the crowd. The video continued. Paige took a swig of wine. "And don't get me started on the bedroom," she sneered. "You are not just a failure in business, Tyrone. You are a failure as a man. You are shooting blanks, honey. You are dry. If it wasn't for your father's money, I would have left you years ago. I would have found a real man, someone who could actually give me a child instead of forcing me to wear this ridiculous rubber stomach." On the screen, she lifted her shirt. She unstrapped the prosthetic belly and threw it onto the couch. The ballroom erupted. It wasn't polite applause anymore. It was chaos. People were shouting, pointing, taking photos. Paige stood there exposed. The woman who had spent months crafting an image of perfection was now revealed as a fraud, a gold digger, and a wife who despised her husband. Tyrone stared at the screen. He watched his wife call him useless. He watched her mock his infertility, the secret he had tried so hard to hide. I looked at him. "Happy birthday, son," I whispered. He turned to me. His face was a mask of pure rage, but not at me. He looked at Paige. "You bitch!" he screamed. His voice cracked, amplified by the microphone. "You said you loved me. You said it didn't matter." He jumped off the stage. He charged toward her. The The guests scrambled out of the way, overturning chairs, spilling drinks. I stood at the podium, calm and still. I watched the empire of lies crumble, but I wasn't done. That was just the appetizer. I pressed the button on the remote again. The video changed. A new image appeared on the screen. A document. A contract. The crowd quieted down, confused. It was the surrogacy agreement, the one I had photographed in the hospital bathroom. But next to it was another document, an email chain, between Paige Banks and Dr. Fletcher. The subject line read, "Transaction complete." I leaned into the microphone. "You wanted a Banks baby, Paige?" I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "You wanted my bloodline, but you didn't want my input, did you? You conspired with a doctor to steal from me while I was on an operating table." I pointed to the screen. "Read it," I commanded. "Read what your partner in crime did to you." The email was magnified. The text was legible even from the back of the room. "Paige is the sample secure. I need the Banks DNA. It is the only way to get the trust fund. Dr. Fletcher, the sample is secured, but we have a better offer. A buyer in Dubai. $200K. I am swapping it out. I am giving you the generic stuff. Homeless donor, no paper trail. You will never know the difference." The room gasped again. A collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the space. Paige stared at the screen. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She read the words. She realized what had happened. She hadn't just been caught stealing. She had been robbed. She had been played. The doctor she trusted, the man she conspired with, had sold her out for a quick buck. He had planned to impregnate her with the sperm of a stranger. A homeless man paid $50 while selling my genetic material to the highest bidder. She looked at me. Her eyes were wild, desperate. "That is a lie," she shrieked. "That is fake. You made that up." "Is it?" I asked. "Or is Dr. Fletcher just a better businessman than you?" I looked toward the back of the room. Dr. Fletcher was there, standing near the exit, trying to blend into the curtains. He looked terrified. He knew the game was up. I pointed at him. "Ask him, Paige. Ask your partner." The crowd turned. Hundreds of eyes fixed on the doctor. He froze like a deer in headlights. Then Tyrone reached Paige. He grabbed her arm, spinning her around. "Is it true?" he screamed. You were going to use him." He pointed at me. The realization of the incestuous nature of her plan hit him. "You are sick," he spat. "You are disgusting." He raised his hand. "Stop," I commanded. My voice was authority. It was the voice of a father. Tyrone froze his hand in the air. "Do not touch her," I said. "She is not worth the jail time." I walked down the stairs. The crowd parted for me. I walked toward them. Beatrice appeared from the side, pushing through the guests. She looked frantic. Her plans were burning down around her. "Solomon, stop this," she yelled. "You are destroying the family. You are humiliating us." I looked at her. "I am not destroying the family, Beatrice," I said. "I am pruning the rot." I reached Paige and Tyrone. I stood between them. "The show is over," I said. "The party is over." I looked at the guests. "Get out," I said. "All of you. The bar is closed." I turned back to my family. "Except you three. And the doctor. We have some business to finish." I signaled to the back of the room. Two men in dark suits stepped forward. FBI agents. O'Malley had called them. They moved toward Dr. Fletcher. Fletcher tried to run, but he stumbled over a chair. The agents were on him in seconds. "You are under arrest for trafficking in human genetic material and conspiracy to commit fraud." As they dragged him away, I looked at Paige. "Your turn," I said. She was shaking. She looked at her stomach, the flat, empty stomach that had been the center of her lie. I didn't know," she whispered. "I didn't know he switched it." "Does it matter?" I asked. "You tried to steal my child, Paige. You tried to make me a father again against my will just to get your hands on a checkbook." I pulled the signed divorce papers from my jacket pocket, the ones I had prepared with O'Malley. "Sign these," I said, handing them to Tyrone. He looked at them. He looked at Paige. "Do it," I said, "or you are out of the will too." Tyrone took the pen. The same gold pen he had tried to force on me. He signed. He didn't hesitate. He handed the papers back to me. "Get out," he said to Paige. "Get out of my house." Paige looked at us. She looked at the ruin of her life. "You will pay for this," she hissed at me. "I will sue you. I will ruin you." "With what money?" I asked. "The credit cards are canceled, Paige. The accounts are frozen. You have nothing." She turned and ran. She ran out of the ballroom, her gown trailing behind her like a shroud. I looked at Beatrice. She was standing alone by the buffet table, holding a glass of champagne, her hand shaking so hard the liquid was spilling over the rim. "We need to talk, Beatrice," I said. She looked at me with eyes full of hate. "I hate you," she whispered. "I have always hated you." "I know," I said. "And that is why you are leaving too." I turned to walk away, but I stumbled. A wave of dizziness hit me. The stress, the adrenaline, it was too much. I felt a sharp pain in my chest. My vision blurred. I fell. I hit the floor hard. The last thing I saw was Beatrice's face twisting into a smile. Finally, she whispered, "Finally." And then darkness took me. The silence in the ballroom was not the silence of peace, it was the vacuum before an explosion. The first video had stunned them, but I was not done. I still had the hammer in my hand, and I was ready to bring it down on the final nail of their coffin. I did not give them time to recover. I did not give Paige time to formulate a lie or Tyrone time to find his spine. I pressed the button on the remote one more time. The screen behind me flickered. The image of Paige mocking her husband vanished and was replaced by a document that was even more damning. It was a high-resolution scan of the email chain between Paige Banks and Dr. Fletcher. The text was blown up large enough for everyone in the back row to read. It was dated 2 weeks ago. The subject line was "Acquisition of Genetic Material." I stepped closer to the microphone, my voice booming through the speakers. "You wanted a baby, Paige," I said, my eyes locking onto her terrified face. "You wanted a child with the Banks name. You wanted the legacy. But you did not want it the natural way. You did not want it with your husband. You wanted to buy it like you buy a handbag." I pointed at the screen. "Read it," I commanded. "Read it out loud." The crowd murmured as they read the words. Paige's email was clinical and cold. "I need the specific donor profile. Banks Sr. I need the intelligence. I need the drive. But I need you to scrub the donor ID. I do not want any legal claim from the grandfather. I just want the genetic code. We will tell Tyrone it is his." I looked at the crowd. I looked at the faces of the people who had eaten my food and drank my wine. "She wanted my DNA," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "She wanted the blood that runs through my veins. She wanted the genes that built this company." But look at what she wrote next. I clicked the remote. The next email highlighted a specific sentence. "Make sure the phenotype is not too dark. We want him to pass as Tyrone S, but we want him manageable. Lighter is better." The room erupted. It was a low, angry rumble that started in the back and rolled forward like a wave. The racism was not subtle. It was blatant. It was written in black and white. She wanted my success, but she despised my skin. She wanted my power, but she wanted it diluted, washed out, and made palatable for her country club friends. I looked at Paige. She was shaking her head, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "No," she mouthed. "That is taken out of context." "Context," I roared. "The context is that you are a bigot, Paige. You married a black man for his money, but you looked down on his heritage. You wanted to use me as a breeding bull, but you wanted to erase me from the picture." I looked at Tyrone. He was staring at the screen, reading the words over and over again. He looked like a man who had been punched in the gut. He knew Paige was ambitious. He knew she was greedy. But he did not know she despised him. He did not know she viewed his skin color as something to be managed. And Dr. Fletcher, I continued turning my gaze to where the doctor had been standing before the FBI agents grabbed him. He was a willing participant. He was going to sell me to you, Paige. But he got greedy. He sold my sample to someone else, and he was going to give you a substitute. He was going to give you the sperm of a stranger because he knew you wouldn't know the difference. He knew you didn't care about the soul of this family. You only cared about the look. Paige let out a scream. It was a primal sound of frustration and rage. She lunged toward the stage, but stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She looked up at me, her face twisted into a mask of pure hatred. "You ruined everything," she shrieked. "You senile old fool. You ruined my life." "I did not ruin it, Paige," I said. "I just turned on the lights." The tension in the room snapped. Tyrone moved. He did not move toward me. He moved toward Paige. He walked with a stiff, jerky gait, his fists clenched at his sides. He reached her in 3 strides. He grabbed her arm, spinning her around to face him. "Is it true?" he demanded, his voice shaking with a mixture of sorrow and fury. "You were going to use his sample. You were going to pretend it was mine." Paige tried to pull away, but Tyrone held on. "Let go of me," she hissed. "Answer me. Tyrone screamed. "You told me we were doing IVF with my sample. You told me the doctors said I had a chance." Paige laughed. It was a brittle, hysterical sound. "Your sample," she spat. "Tyrone, you do not have a sample. You are dry. You have been sterile since you were 12 years old." The words hit Tyrone like physical blows. He stepped back, releasing her arm. He looked at me, then back at her. What he whispered. "Your father never told you," she sneered, enjoying the pain she was inflicting. She wanted to hurt someone, and Tyrone was the closest target. He hid it from you. Mumps, Tyrone. You had mumps. You are shooting blanks. You are useless. You are not a man. You are just a walking bank account, and now you do not even have that. The humiliation was absolute. Tyrone stood there in front of hundreds of people, stripped of his manhood, stripped of his dignity. He looked at the guests who were watching with morbid fascination. He looked at his mother, who was standing frozen by the buffet. "You knew," he shouted at Beatrice. "You knew, and you let me believe." Beatrice did not answer. She looked away. Tyrone turned back to Paige. The rage that had been building in him for years, the resentment of being the lesser partner, the shame of his failures, it all boiled over. "You witch!" he roared. He raised his hand. It was an impulsive, violent motion. He slapped her. The sound was sharp and loud, echoing through the silent ballroom. It was not a tap. It was a full-force blow that knocked Paige to the ground. The crowd gasped. Someone screamed. Paige fell onto the polished floor, her dress billowing around her. She looked up at him, holding her cheek, her eyes wide with shock. "You hit me," she whispered. "I should have done it years ago," Tyrone shouted, standing over her. "You used me. You lied to me. You made me look like a fool." I watched from the podium. I did not intervene. This was the destruction of the house of cards they had built. It was ugly. It was violent. But it was necessary. They were tearing each other apart, consuming themselves in their own greed and hatred. But Beatrice was not done. She saw her world collapsing. She saw her son losing control, her daughter-in-law exposed, and her husband, her golden goose, holding the detonator. She snapped. She charged toward the stage. She moved faster than I thought possible for a woman her age in heels. She pushed past the guests, knocking over a waiter with a tray of champagne. "Solomon," she screamed, "stop this! Stop it right now!" I looked down at her. She was climbing the stairs to the stage, her face red with exertion and fury. She looked like a demon. "It is over, Beatrice," I said calmly. "The truth is out." "No," she yelled, reaching the top of the stairs. "You are sick. You are delusional. Give me that microphone." She lunged for me. She grabbed the stand, trying to wrestle it away. I held firm. "I am not giving you anything, Beatrice. Not anymore." She clawed at my hands, her nails digging into my skin. She was strong, fueled by panic. "You are ruining us," she hissed. "You are destroying the family name." I pushed her back gently, trying to create distance. "You destroyed the name when you turned it into a criminal enterprise," I said. She screamed a wordless sound of rage and threw her full weight against me. I was not expecting it. I stepped back, my heel catching on the edge of the riser behind the podium. I lost my balance. I fell backward. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the ceiling lights spinning. I saw Beatrice's face twisted in a rictus of hate. I saw the edge of the heavy oak table that held the projector, my head connected with the corner of the table. There was a sickening crack. A flash of white light blinded me, followed by a wave of darkness. I hit the floor hard. I lay there dazed. I felt a warm wetness spreading through my hair, soaking into my collar. Blood. A lot of it. I heard screams. "He is hurt." Someone yelled, "Call 911." I tried to sit up, but the room spun violently. I saw Beatrice standing over me. For a second, I thought I saw concern. But then her eyes narrowed. She looked at the blood pooling around my head. She looked at the microphone lying on the floor. She leaned down close to my face. No one else could hear her over the chaos of the crowd. "Stay down, Solomon," she whispered. "Just die. Do us all a favor and die." I tried to speak, but my tongue felt heavy. My vision was tunneling. I saw Tyrone running up the stairs. I saw guests rushing forward. But amidst the chaos, I saw one thing clearly. Dr. Fletcher. He had broken free from the agents in the confusion, or maybe they had let him go to help with the medical emergency. He was pushing through the crowd toward the stage. He had a look in his eyes that I recognized. It was the look of a man who saw an opportunity to finish the job. I tried to point. I tried to warn them, but my arm wouldn't obey. The darkness was closing in. The sounds of the party faded into a dull roar. I was vulnerable. I was bleeding. And I was about to be put into the care of the man who had sold my soul. I needed to stay awake. I needed to fight. But the blow to my head was severe. As I slipped into unconsciousness, I had one final thought. This was not an accident. This was the next level of the game. And if I didn't wake up soon, I would lose everything, including my life. The hospital room was sterile, cold, and terrifyingly quiet. I woke up not to the comforting hum of machines, but to the sound of a lock clicking shut. My head throbbed a dull, rhythmic ache that reminded me of the fall, but my mind was sharp. I kept my eyes closed, listening. I smelled antiseptic and cheap cologne. Dr. Fletcher. I heard his footsteps approaching the bed. They were slow, deliberate. He was not checking my vitals. He was checking if I was alone. I was. The room was empty save for the two of us. The lights were dimmed. It was the graveyard shift, the perfect time for accidents to happen. "Well, Solomon," he whispered, his voice dripping with malice, "you certainly know how to throw a party. But the show is over now." I felt him lean over me. I felt his breath on my face. "You should have just signed the papers," he said. "You could have lived a few more years in ignorant bliss. But you had to be a hero. You had to expose everything." I heard the distinctive sound of a syringe being uncapped. "Now we have to do this the hard way," he continued. "A stroke, they will say. Complications from the head trauma. Tragic, really. An embolism. Quick, painless. And best of all, undetectable if you do not know what to look for." I felt the cold touch of an alcohol wipe on my arm. He was prepping the site. He was going to inject me with something lethal, probably potassium chloride, to stop my heart, or an air bubble to cause an embolism. He was going to murder me right here in a hospital bed and walk away clean. I tensed my muscles. I waited. I needed him close. I needed him committed. "This is for Paige," he whispered, "and for my retirement fund in the Caymans. Goodbye, Solomon." I felt the needle prick my skin. Now. My eyes snapped open. I did not see fear in his face yet, just shock. I moved with a speed that defied my age and my injuries. My left hand shot up. I did not grab the syringe. I grabbed his wrist. I clamped my fingers around the delicate bones of his joint with the crushing force of a man who had spent 40 years hauling steel crates. Fletcher gasped. He tried to pull back, but I held him fast. The needle hovered inches from my vein, a drop of clear liquid beating at the tip. "Not today, doctor," I growled, my voice rough but steady. Fletcher's eyes widened. He stared at me, at the old man who was supposed to be helpless. He saw the fire in my eyes. He saw the predator. "Let go," he hissed, struggling. "You are hurt. You are weak." I squeezed harder. I felt something crunch in his wrist. He cried out, dropping the syringe. It clattered to the floor, rolling under the bed. "I am not weak," I said, sitting up slowly, never releasing my grip. "I am patient. You were awake," he stammered. "I was never asleep," I said. I used my other hand to reach into my mouth. I pulled out a small piece of cotton soaked in red dye. I spat it onto the floor. The blood from the party the head wound, it was real enough to get me admitted, but not enough to kill me. I had bitten my lip hard before the fall, adding to the effect, ensuring the paramedics saw blood, ensuring they brought me here to this specific hospital where I knew Fletcher had privileges. "It was a trap," I said, pulling him closer until our faces were inches apart. "A trap for a rat." Fletcher's face went pale. He looked at the door, the locked door. "You are insane," he whispered. "No one will believe you. It is your word against mine. I am a respected surgeon. You are a senile old man with a head injury. Are you?" I asked. I looked toward the heavy curtains drawn across the window. "Now, gentlemen." The curtains parted. Two men stepped out. They were not doctors. They were wearing dark suits and earpieces. One of them held a video camera, the red recording light blinking steadily. The other held a badge. "Federal Agents Fletcher." Fletcher let out a strangled sound. He looked at the agents, then back at me. "We have it all on tape," the agent with the badge said, walking forward. "The confession. The syringe. The intent. You are done, doctor." I released his wrist. He cradled it against his chest, whimpering. "Attempted murder." The agent continued pulling out handcuffs, plus trafficking in human genetic material, fraud, and conspiracy. "You are going away for a long time." Fletcher looked at me with pure hatred. "You ruined everything," he spat. "Why? Why couldn't you just die?" Because I have work to do, I said, swinging my legs over the side of the bed. I have a family to clean up. The agents cuffed him. They read him his rights. He sagged, defeated a small man stripped of his white coat and his arrogance. As they dragged him out, the agent stopped. Mr. Banks, do you need medical attention for that head wound? I touched the bandage on my forehead. It throbbed, but it was a good pain, a reminder that I was alive. I will be fine, I said. Just get him out of here, and call my lawyer. Tell him phase 3 is a go. The agent nodded. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the city lights. The sun was coming up. A new day. I had survived the night. I had survived the betrayal. But the hardest part was still to come. I had dealt with the hired help. Now I had to deal with the family. Tyrone, Paige, Beatrice. They were still out there. They were probably at the lawyer's office right now trying to salvage what was left of their scheme. They thought I was dead or incapacitated. They thought they still had a chance. I smiled. A cold, hard smile. They were wrong. I went to the closet where my clothes were stored. I dressed quickly. My tuxedo was ruined, stained with fake blood and real sweat. But I didn't care. I put on my shoes. I tied the laces tight. I walked out of the hospital room, leaving the syringe on the floor as evidence. I walked past the nurses' station, ignoring their startled looks. I walked out into the morning air. I hailed a cab. To the O'Malley law firm, I told the driver. And step on it. I have an appointment with destiny. The final showdown was coming. And this time, I wasn't bringing a video. I was bringing the hammer. The conference room on the 45th floor of the O'Malley law firm was a fortress of glass and steel designed to intimidate. It offered a panoramic view of the Chicago skyline, a view that usually cost $1,000 an hour to look at. Today, the room was occupied by two people who thought they were about to inherit it all. I stood in the adjacent office, watching them through the one-way mirror. Paige was sitting at the head of the long granite table, rubbing her silicone belly with a practiced maternal tenderness. She looked nervous, but there was a glint of anticipation in her eyes. She was doing mental math, calculating the payout. Tyrone was pacing. He looked like a man walking to the gallows, but hoping for a pardon. He kept checking his watch, wiping sweat from his forehead. They thought I was dead, or at the very least incapacitated. The last time they saw me, I was being wheeled out of the ballroom on a stretcher, bleeding from the head. They assumed the stroke Dr. Fletcher promised had finally happened. They were here because O'Malley had summoned them for an urgent reading of the estate status. They expected a will reading. They expected a funeral arrangement. I adjusted my cufflinks. I straightened my tie. I looked at O'Malley. "Are you ready, Solomon?" he asked. "I am ready," I said. "Let's go to court." O'Malley opened the heavy oak doors. He walked in first. "Please sit down, Mr. Banks," he said, gesturing to a chair. "We have a lot to cover." Tyrone sat down quickly. Paige leaned forward, her face arranging itself into a mask of tragic grief. "Mr. O'Malley," she said, her voice thick with fake tears, "please tell us, is Dad gone? We have been calling the hospital, but they would not tell us anything." O'Malley did not answer. He simply stepped aside. I walked into the room. I did not limp. I did not need a cane. I walked with the stride of a man who had marched 20 miles with a rucksack. The bandage on my forehead was gone, replaced by a small plaster strip. I wore a charcoal suit that cost more than Tyrone's car. The effect was instantaneous. Paige let out a strangled gasp, clutching her chest. Her eyes bulged. She looked like she was seeing a ghost. Tyrone turned white. He gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles popping. "Dad," he whispered, you are okay." I walked to the head of the table. I stood over them, casting a long shadow. "I am better than okay, Tyrone," I said, my voice filling the room. "I am awake." I pulled out the chair at the head of the table, the chair Paige had been eyeing. "Get up," I said to her. She scrambled out of the seat, nearly tripping over her own feet. She moved to the side, standing next to Tyrone. They huddled together like children caught breaking a window. I sat down. I placed my hands on the cool granite. "You look disappointed, Paige," I said. "Were you hoping for a closed casket? It would have made the inheritance tax easier to calculate, wouldn't it?" She stammered. "No, Dad. We were worried. We thought you had a stroke." The doctor said. "The doctor is in federal custody," I interrupted, "and he is singing like a canary. He told them everything, Paige. The deal, the swap, the money." She went silent. Her hands went instinctively to her fake stomach, protecting the lie that was literally strapped to her body. Tyrone looked at me. His eyes were red-rimmed. He looked exhausted, beaten. "Dad, I can explain," he started. "Save it," I snapped. "We are past explanations. We are at the consequences phase." I reached into my briefcase. I pulled out 3 thick, color-coded folders. I threw them onto the table. They landed with a heavy slap sliding across the polished stone until they stopped right in front of my son. Thud, thud, thud. 3 files, I said, 3 problems, and 3 solutions. Tyrone looked at the folders. He didn't want to touch them. He knew they were radioactive. "Open the blue one," I commanded. He opened it with trembling fingers. Inside was a legal document thick with clauses and addendums. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "It is a petition for dissolution of marriage," I said. I looked at Paige. "It is a divorce decree, irreconcilable differences, fraud, adultery, conspiracy to commit murder. Take your pick." I had O'Malley draft it this morning. Paige stared at the document. "You cannot force us to divorce," she hissed. "We love each other." "Do you?" I asked. "I seem to recall a video where you called him useless and impotent. I seem to recall you planning to raise another man's child as his." I looked at Tyrone. "She despises you, son. She hates your skin. She hates your weakness. She only loves the zeros in my bank account. If you stay with her, you get nothing. If you sign this, you might salvage a shred of your dignity." Tyrone looked at Paige. He looked at the woman who had humiliated him in front of the world. I saw the conflict in his eyes, the habit of submission warring with the fresh wound of betrayal. "Open the red folder," I said. Tyrone closed the divorce papers. He opened the red file. Inside was a single sheet of paper. An eviction notice. "Effective immediately," I said. "Paige Banks is barred from entering any property owned by the Banks Trust. That includes the mansion, the lake house, the apartments downtown, and the office buildings." I looked at Paige. "Security has already packed your bags. They are waiting on the curb outside. You have 1 hour to collect them before they are donated to Goodwill." "You cannot do that," she screamed. "This is my home. I live there." "Not anymore," I said. "The lease was in my name. The deed is in my name. You were a guest who tried to kill the host. Your hospitality has been revoked." She lunged for the table, reaching for the paper as if tearing it up would change the reality. "Do not touch it," I barked. "That is a legal copy. The sheriff is serving the original at the house right now." She shrank back, tears of rage streaming down her face. She looked at Tyrone. "Do something," she begged. "He is throwing me on the street." "I am pregnant, Tyrone." Tyrone didn't move. He was staring at the 3rd folder, the black one. "Open it," I said softly. He hesitated. He knew this was the worst one. The blue one was about his marriage. The red one was about his wife. The black one was about him. He opened it. He stared at the spreadsheet on the first page. His face went gray. $2 million, Tyrone," I said. He looked up at me, terror in his eyes. I don't know what that is," he stammered. "Don't lie to me," I said, slamming my hand on the table. "Do not lie to me. Not today. That is the forensic accounting report from your venture capital firm." I leaned forward. "I know about the skimming, Tyrone. I know about the phantom maintenance fees for the truck fleet. I know you were siphoning money from the logistics maintenance budget to pay off your gambling debts and Paige S. shopping addiction. You stole $2 million from the company I built." He started to shake. "Dad, please. I was going to pay it back. With what I asked. With the inheritance you planned to steal from my cold, dead hands." I stood up. I walked around the table until I was standing right behind him. I put my hands on the back of his chair. "Embezzlement is a felony, Tyrone. Grand larceny. Money laundering. I have enough here to put you in a federal prison for 20 years. Paige looked at Tyrone with disgust. "You idiot," she hissed. "You got caught." I ignored her. I focused on my son. "So here's the situation," I said. "The FBI is not involved yet. O'Malley kept this internal. For now." Tyrone turned in his chair, grabbing my sleeve. "Dad, please. Don't send me to jail. I cannot go to jail. I won't survive in there." "I know," I said. "You are soft, Tyrone. You always have been." I walked to the window. I looked down at the city. "I am going to give you a choice," I said. "A choice you do not deserve." I turned back to him. "Option A. I hand this black folder to the district attorney. You go to trial. You go to prison. You lose everything. Your freedom, your name, your future. Tyrone was sobbing now. Option B, he choked out. What is option B? Option B, I said, is you sign the divorce papers. You let Paige walk out of here alone. You sign a document renouncing your claim to the bank's estate. You give up your trust fund. You give up the house. You give up the title of vice president. And then what, he asked. And then I said, you go to work. Work, he asked, confused. Yes, work, real work, not sitting in an office pretending to be a businessman. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a set of keys. They were heavy brass keys, the keys to an 18-wheeler. I bought a truck, I said. A Freightliner. Used but reliable, just like the one I started with 40 years ago. I tossed the keys onto the table. They landed on top of the divorce papers. You are going to drive Tyrone. You are going to haul freight. You are going to start at the bottom. You are going to learn what it means to earn $1 instead of stealing it. You will pay me back every cent of that $2 million out of your paycheck. It will take you the rest of your life, but you will be a free man. And maybe if you stick with it, you might even become a man I can respect. The room was silent. Tyrone looked at the keys. He looked at the life of luxury he was losing. He looked at the prison sentence waiting in the black folder. He looked at Paige. She was staring at him, her eyes pleading. Don't do it, Tyrone. Don't let him win. We can fight this. We can fight for the money. Tyrone looked at her belly. He looked at the woman who had called him useless. He picked up the pen. He didn't look at her again. He signed the divorce papers. He signed the renunciation of the trust. Then he reached out and picked up the truck keys. He clutched them in his fist like a lifeline. I will drive, he whispered. I will drive the truck, Dad. Good choice, I said. Paige let out a scream that shattered the tension. No, she yelled. You cannot do this. You are leaving me with nothing. You have your health, I said coldly, and you have your acting career. You are very good at pretending. I am pregnant, she shrieked, clutching her stomach. I am carrying the bank's heir. You cannot kick a pregnant woman onto the street. It is illegal. It is immoral. I looked at her. I looked at the mound under her dress. Still playing that card, Paige, I asked. Even after everything. It is not a card, she yelled. It is a baby. Tyrone's baby. Your grandson. Tyrone looked at her. Stop it, Paige, he said, his voice dull. We know. I know I am sterile. Dad knows. Everyone knows. It was a miracle, she lied desperately. The doctor said it happens. It is a miracle, baby. I walked over to her. I stood right in front of her. A miracle, I said. Or a prop. I reached out. Don't touch me, she screamed, backing away. Assault. He is assaulting me. I stopped. You are right, I said. I won't touch you. But the world needs to see the truth. I looked at O'Malley. Turn on the TV, I said. O'Malley picked up a remote. He turned on the large monitor on the wall. It was tuned to a local news channel. But it wasn't showing the news, it was showing a live feed from a social media account, Paige S. account. She had started a live stream minutes before we walked in, hoping to control the narrative if things went wrong. Her phone was propped up against her purse on the table, recording everything. Look at the comments, Paige, I said. The screen was flooded with messages. She is lying. Look at her stomach, it moved sideways. That is a pillow. Gold digger. She had broadcast her own downfall. She had tried to use public opinion as a shield, and it had turned into a sword. I looked at her. The jig is up, Paige. Drop the act. Or do I need to bring in a doctor to do a physical right here on the live stream? She looked at the phone. She looked at the comments. She looked at Tyrone clutching his truck keys. She looked at me. Her face contorted. The mask fell away completely. I hate you, she screamed. I hate you all. She grabbed her purse. She grabbed her phone, ending the stream. She turned to run, but she wasn't fast enough, because outside the glass doors of the conference room I saw blue uniforms. The police were here, and this time they weren't here for me. They were here for the woman who tried to defraud a family and the woman who falsified a police report. I watched as she ran toward the door, only to find it blocked by the officers I had asked Marcus Jackson to send. The final act was about to begin, and this time the handcuffs were real. Paige did not go quietly into the night. Instead, she went to the internet, and she went to war. I sat in my office at Banks Logistics watching the chaos unfold on a wall of monitors. She had launched a live stream titled Surviving the Banks Family, and it was trending #1 in the country. On the screen, Paige sat in a dimly lit room, her eyes swollen and red, her hands cradling her fake belly protectively. She looked like a broken angel, a martyr for all the oppressed women of the world. "He kicked me out," she sobbed to the camera, her voice cracking perfectly. "My father-in-law, Solomon Banks, kicked a pregnant woman onto the street in the middle of winter. He cut off my credit cards. He locked me out of my home. He wants me to lose this baby because he hates that it is mixed race. He wants to erase his own grandchild because he is a bitter, hateful old man. It was a masterclass in manipulation. She took the truth, twisted it until it snapped, and then wrapped it in a blanket of victimhood. The comments section was a river of vitriol aimed directly at me. People were calling for boycotts of my company. They were calling for my arrest. Outside the window of my office, I could hear the chanting. A crowd had gathered at the gates of the logistics compound. They held signs that read, "Justice for Paige and protect the unborn." My trucks were blocked. My drivers were being harassed. The empire I had built over 40 years was bleeding money by the minute because of a lie told by a desperate woman. O'Malley stood next to me watching the feed. His face was grim. "We have to stop this, Solomon," he said. "The stock is taking a hit. The board is getting nervous. They are talking about forcing you to step down until this is resolved." "Let them talk," I said calmly. "But Solomon, the public opinion is killing us," O'Malley argued. "We need to settle. Give her some money. Make her go away." "No," I said, turning away from the window. "If I pay her, she wins. If I pay her, I admit guilt. And I have never paid a terrorist in my life." I picked up the phone. I dialed the head of public relations. "Set up a press conference," I ordered. "Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., right here in the warehouse. Invite everyone. CNN, Fox, the local bloggers. Invite the protesters too. And send a special invitation to Paige Banks. Tell her I am ready to apologize. Tell her I want to make things right publicly." O'Malley looked at me like I had lost my mind. "You are going to apologize?" he asked. I smiled, the same cold smile I wore when I faced down union busters in the 80s. "I am going to give her a platform, Abe. I am going to give her exactly what she wants, the biggest audience in the world, and then I am going to turn on the lights." The next morning, the main warehouse of Banks Logistics was transformed into a media circus. We cleared out the loading bay and set up a stage in front of a wall of shipping containers. It was gritty, industrial, and real. It was my turf. The air smelled of diesel and hard work. The press arrived in droves. The protesters filtered in, filling the back of the massive space, their signs lowered but their faces hostile. They wanted blood. They wanted to see the tyrant fall. At 9:55, a black limousine pulled up. Paige stepped out. She was dressed in a modest gray maternity dress, flat shoes, and a cardigan. She looked frail. She looked vulnerable. Beatrice was with her, holding her arm, playing the supportive grandmother. They walked through the crowd, parting the sea of reporters like royalty. Paige stopped to hug a few protesters, wiping tears from her eyes. She was enjoying every second of this. She walked up the stairs to the stage. I was already there, standing at the podium. I extended my hand. She ignored it. She stood next to me, looking out at the cameras, clutching her stomach. "Thank you all for coming," I said, my voice echoing through the vast space. "I know there are a lot of questions. I know there is a lot of anger." I looked at Paige. "My daughter-in-law has made some serious accusations," I continued. "She claims I abandoned her. She claims I am endangering her health and the health of her unborn child." Paige leaned into her microphone. "You did?" she said, her voice trembling. "You threw me out like garbage, Solomon. You do not care about this baby." The crowd murmured their support. Shouts of shame rang out. I raised my hand for silence. "I care about the truth, Paige," I said. "And the truth is, family is everything to me. That is why I have invited a special guest today." I gestured to the side of the stage. Dr. Eris Thorne stepped out. He was the chief of obstetrics at Mercy General Hospital, a man with an impeccable reputation and no connection to my family or my payroll. He wore a white coat and carried a portable ultrasound machine. "If this baby is in danger," I said, looking at the crowd, "we need to know. If my grandson is at risk, I want to pay for the best care possible. Right now." I turned to Paige. "Paige, I am offering you a full medical evaluation. Live. In front of the world. Let Dr. Thorne check the baby. Let us see the heartbeat." If everything is real, I will sign the house over to you today. I will reinstate your accounts. I will double your trust fund. The crowd went quiet. It was a generous offer, an impossible offer to refuse if you were telling the truth. Paige froze. Paige. Her eyes darted from me to the doctor to the ultrasound machine. She licked her lips. "This is a stunt," she said, her voice rising in panic. "You are trying to humiliate me. I have my own doctor." "Your doctor is in jail," I reminded her. "Dr. Thorne is independent. He is the best. Why would you refuse a checkup, Paige? Think of the baby." "I am not doing this," she screamed, backing away. "This is invasive. My body is not a prop for your media games." The crowd shifted. They sensed her hesitation. Why would a mother refuse to prove her baby was safe, especially for $1 million payout? "She is lying," someone shouted from the back. "Check the baby," another yelled. Paige looked trapped. She looked at Beatrice for help. Beatrice stepped forward. "This is outrageous," she shouted. "You cannot force her. We are leaving." She grabbed Paige's arm and tried to pull her off the stage. "Not so fast," I boomed. I pressed a button on the podium. Behind me, a massive projection screen lowered from the ceiling rafters. It was the screen we used for logistics training. It was 20 feet tall. "If you won't let the doctor examine you, Paige," I said, "I suppose we have to rely on the home security footage." Paige stopped. She turned slowly to look at the screen. "No," she whispered. "No." I played the video. It was time-stamped 4 days ago, the day of the 911 call, the day she claimed she was terrified of me. The video showed the living room of my mansion. It was high-definition 4K clarity. Paige walked into the frame. She was alone in the house. She looked annoyed. She kicked off her shoes. Then she did it. She reached under her dress. She unbuckled a strap. She pulled a large silicone mound from her midsection. She threw the fake belly onto the sofa. It bounced unrealistically. She scratched her stomach, sighing with relief. She walked to the liquor cabinet. She poured herself a large glass of red wine. She lit a cigarette. She sat down on the sofa next to the plastic belly and propped her feet up on the coffee table. She picked up her phone and started laughing. The audio was crisp. "Idiot," she said into the phone, presumably talking to Tyrone. "Your dad is so stupid. He actually bought the ultrasound photo. I am going to be rich." The warehouse was silent. Dead silent. The kind of silence that happens when a collective belief is shattered instantly. The protesters lowered their signs. The reporters stopped taking photos and just stared. On the screen, Paige took a long drag of the cigarette and blew smoke rings at the ceiling. "I just have to wear this stupid rubber thing for a few more weeks," she said on the video, tapping the fake belly. "Then I will have a tragic miscarriage, and I will sue the old man for stress. It is the perfect crime." I paused the video. The image of Paige drinking wine next to her detached stomach froze on the giant screen looming over the real Paige standing on the stage. I looked at her. "The perfect crime," I repeated. "Except for the cameras, Paige. I installed them the day you moved in, because I never trusted you, not for a second." Paige stood there, stripped naked in front of the world. Her hands fell from her stomach. There was no point in holding it anymore. The lie was dead. She looked at the crowd. She saw the anger in their eyes. The people who had defended her, who had marched for her, now looked at her with pure disgust. They had been used. Their empathy had been weaponized by a con artist. "You witch," a woman in the front row screamed. "Liar," another shouted. Beatrice backed away from Paige, distancing herself from the blast radius. She looked at me with fear. She knew she was next. Paige started to shake. She looked at me. "You set me up," she hissed. "I caught you," I corrected. Then the side doors of the warehouse burst open. This time it was not a doctor. It was the police. And they were not alone. They were accompanied by federal agents. "Paige Banks," a voice boomed. "You are under arrest." Paige looked for a way out. She looked at the stairs. She looked at the back exit. But there was nowhere to go. She was surrounded by the media, surrounded by the police, surrounded by the truth. She grabbed the microphone stand. She looked like she was going to swing it. "Do not come near me," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I will sue all of you. I am the victim here." The officers moved in. They did not hesitate. They swarmed the stage. One officer grabbed her arm. Another grabbed her other arm. She fought. She kicked and screamed, cursing like a sailor shedding the skin of the refined socialite to reveal the street brawler underneath. "Get off me," she yelled. "Do you know who I am?" "We know exactly who you are," an agent said, snapping handcuffs on her wrists. "You are a fraud." They dragged her across the stage. She passed me, kicking and screaming. I looked her in the eye. Goodbye, Paige, I said softly. I hope the prison uniform fits better than that fake belly. The cameras flashed blindingly, capturing every moment of her perp walk. This was not just an arrest, it was a public execution of her character. She would never recover from this. Her name would be synonymous with deception. As they hauled her away, the crowd erupted into applause. It was a strange, surreal sound. They were cheering for justice. They were cheering for the old man they had come to hate 5 minutes ago. I stood at the podium alone. I looked at the sea of faces. I adjusted my tie. I am sorry for the disruption, I said into the microphone. But at Banks Logistics, we value transparency. I looked at Beatrice, who was trying to sneak away through the side exit. Where are you going, Beatrice? I called out. We are not done. She froze. The crowd turned to her. She looked at me like a trapped animal. You knew, I said to the crowd, pointing at my wife. She knew about the fake belly. She knew about the fraud. She was the one who paid for the silicone. Beatrice shook her head, tears streaming down her face. No, Solomon, she tricked me too. Stop lying, I roared. I pressed the remote one last time. A new video played. It was Beatrice and Paige in the kitchen. How much longer do I have to pretend to like him? Beatrice asked on the screen. Just until he signs the papers, Mom, Paige replied. Then we can put him in a home. And we can spend the money. Beatrice laughed. I cannot wait to redecorate. I hate this house. The crowd gasped again. Beatrice collapsed. She fell to her knees, sobbing. Officers, take her too, I said. The police moved toward my wife. I watched them take her. I felt nothing. No sadness, no regret. Just a cold, clean sense of closure. The warehouse cleared out slowly. The reporters packed up their gear, rushing to file the story of the century. The protesters left ashamed and silent. I stood on the stage, looking at the empty space. It was over. The cancer was cut out. I walked down the stairs. Tyrone was waiting for me at the bottom. He had watched the whole thing from the wings. He was holding his truck keys. Dad, he said, his voice hoarse. I looked at him. He looked broken, but for the first time in his life, he looked real. Get in the truck, Tyrone, I said. You have a delivery to make in Omaha. Do not be late. He nodded. He wiped his eyes. Yes, sir, he said. He walked away toward the loading bay. He walked with a purpose. I watched him go. Then I turned and walked toward my office. I had a company to run, and for the first time in a long time, I had a future I could look forward to, a future that was mine. The rain hammered against the windows of the mansion, sounding like 1,000 tiny fists demanding entry. But inside, the silence was absolute. It was the day of the final eviction, the day the last ghost was exorcised from my home. I stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down at the woman I had shared my life with for 40 years. Beatrice stood in the center of the marble foyer. She looked small. The arrogance that had worn like a second skin was gone, stripped away by lawyers and forensic accountants. She was not wearing her mink coat. The FBI had seized it along with her jewelry and her car as assets purchased with laundered funds. She was wearing a simple raincoat and cheap shoes. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. Solomon, she whispered, her voice echoing in the empty hall. Please. You cannot do this. Where will I go? I walked down the stairs slowly, my steps echoing the rhythm of a judge's gavel. I carried a single object in my hand. It was a battered brown suitcase. The leather was cracked and peeling, scuffed by time and neglect. The handle was wrapped in black electrical tape. I stopped on the bottom step and tossed the suitcase at her feet. It landed with a dull thud that seemed to shake the floor. You recognize this, Beatrice? I asked. She stared at it. She recoiled as if it were a snake. It is garbage, she spat. Why are you giving me garbage? It is not garbage, I said. It is history. This is the suitcase you brought with you the day you moved into my one-bedroom apartment 40 years ago. It contains the exact same items you had then. 2 dresses, a pair of worn shoes, a hairbrush, and nothing else. I looked her in the eye. You came into my life with nothing, Beatrice. And because of your greed, you leave with nothing. That is the balance of the universe. She fell to her knees, clutching the hem of my trousers. Solomon, have mercy. I am an old woman. I have no friends. I have no money. The government took everything. They took what you stole, I corrected, stepping back from her grasp. They left you what you earned, which is this suitcase. She looked at the door where two federal marshals were waiting impatiently. They were there to escort her to her new residence. It was not a prison cell, not yet. Her trial was still months away. In the meantime, she had been assigned to a state-subsidized housing project on the south side, a place with peeling paint and cold radiators, a place where the heating worked intermittently and the neighbors shouted through paper-thin walls. It was a far cry from the heated floors and silk sheets of the bank's mansion. "I cannot live there," she sobbed. "I will die there." "Then maybe you should have thought about that before you signed your name to a money laundering scheme," I said coldly. "Maybe you should have thought about that before you tried to murder the man who put a roof over your head." I nodded to the marshals. "Get her out of here." They stepped forward. They lifted Beatrice by her arms. She screamed. She kicked. She cursed me with words that would make a sailor blush. But they dragged her out. They dragged her through the heavy oak doors and into the rain. I watched them go. I watched them load her into the back of a government sedan. I watched the taillights fade into the gray afternoon. I closed the door. I locked it. I turned around and looked at my empty house. It was quiet. But for the first time in years, it was not lonely. It was clean. The air felt lighter. I walked to the kitchen and poured myself a cup of coffee. I drank it standing up, looking out at the garden. I thought about Beatrice sitting in her new apartment, staring at a cracked wall, wondering where it all went wrong. She would never understand that she was the architect of her own ruin. She would blame me until her last breath. And I was fine with that. I had not sought revenge. I had sought justice. And justice had been served cold and hard. 6 months later, and 1,000 miles away, a different kind of justice was playing out on a frozen highway in North Dakota. The wind howled across the plains, driving snow horizontally across the asphalt. A massive 18-wheeler fought against the gale, its engine roaring in defiance. Inside the cab, a man with calloused hands and dark circles under his eyes gripped the steering wheel. Tyrone Banks was tired. His back ached from 10 hours of driving. His stomach growled. He had not eaten since a stale donut at a truck stop in Minnesota. He was not the soft man in the Italian suit who had stood on a stage and claimed my empire. That man was dead. This man wore flannel and work boots. This man knew the price of diesel and the weight of a load. He pulled the rig into a roadside diner, the brakes hissing as he parked among the other giants of the road. He climbed down from the cab, the cold air biting his face. He walked into the diner, shaking the snow from his coat. He sat at the counter and ordered the special: meatloaf and mashed potatoes. It was cheap, it was filling, it was all he could afford. As he ate, he looked up at the television mounted in the corner. The local news was playing. And in business news, the anchor said Solomon Banks, founder of Banks Logistics, has announced a massive new initiative. Tyrone froze. His fork hovered halfway to his mouth. On the screen, footage played of a press conference. I was there standing at a podium, looking stronger and happier than I had in years. I was announcing the expansion of the Banks Foundation. Tyrone watched as I shook hands with young entrepreneurs. He watched as I spoke about hard work and integrity. He watched the man he had tried to rob give away millions to strangers. The waitress poured him more coffee. "That is a good man right there," she said, nodding at the screen. "My cousin got a grant from his foundation. Changed his life. They say he built that whole company from one truck. Can you believe it?" Tyrone looked down at his plate. His vision blurred. Tears, hot and stinging, welled in his eyes. "Yes," he whispered. "I can believe it." He wiped his eyes with the back of his rough hand. He looked at his own reflection in the napkin dispenser. He saw the changes, the lines on his face, the grit under his fingernails. He was driving a truck just like I had. He was starting at the bottom just like I had. For the first time in his life, he felt a connection to me that wasn't based on money. It was based on sweat. It was based on the road. He pulled out his phone. He opened his messages. He typed a text to a number he hadn't called in 6 months. "I saw you on TV, Dad. You looked good. I am in North Dakota, hauling lumber. It is hard work, but I am doing it. I am paying my debt." He hesitated. Then he added one more line. "I am sorry." He hit send. He didn't expect a reply. He didn't deserve one. He put the phone down and finished his meal. He paid his bill, leaving a generous tip he couldn't really afford because he knew how hard the waitress worked. He put his coat back on and walked out into the storm. He had a delivery to make. And for the first time in his life, Tyrone Banks was going to be on time. Back in Chicago, I stood in front of the full-length mirror in my dressing room. I adjusted my silk tie, smoothing the knot. I brushed a speck of dust from the lapel of my navy blue suit. The man staring back at me was 71 years old, but he didn't look like a relic. He looked like a titan. My phone buzzed on the dresser. I picked it up. I saw the message from Tyrone. I read it twice. I didn't reply. Not yet. Words were easy. Consistency was hard. I would wait. I would watch. If he was still driving in a year, if he was still paying his debt, then maybe we would talk. But reading those words, "I am doing it," gave me a sense of peace I hadn't expected. He was learning. Finally, he was learning. I put the phone in my pocket and walked downstairs. The house was no longer a tomb. It was a headquarters. I had converted the ballroom, the scene of the disastrous gender reveal, into a workspace. I opened the double doors. The room was buzzing with energy. 50 young men and women sat around tables, their laptops open, their eyes bright with ambition. They were the first cohort of the Banks Foundation incubator. They were kids from the South Side, from the neighborhoods everyone else had forgotten. They had ideas. They had fire. They just needed a chance. When I walked in, they stopped talking. They stood up. It wasn't the fearful silence of my family. It was the respectful silence of troops greeting their commander. "Please sit," I said, smiling. "We have work to do." I walked to the front of the room. I looked at their faces. I saw myself in them. I saw the hunger. I saw the dream. I didn't have a son to leave my company to, not in the traditional sense. But looking at this room, I realized I had 50 sons and daughters. I had a legacy that was bigger than biology. I picked up a marker and turned to the whiteboard. "Today, we are going to talk about logistics," I said. "But not just moving boxes. We are going to talk about moving mountains." I spent the next 3 hours teaching. I shared the secrets I had learned over 40 years. I told them about the failures. I told them about the betrayals. I told them that the hardest part of success wasn't making the money, it was keeping your soul. When the session was over, I stayed behind to answer questions. A young man named Marcus approached me. He reminded me of Tyrone before the world corrupted him. "Mr. Banks," he asked, hesitating, "can I ask you a personal question?" "Go ahead, Marcus. You gave away so much. You cut off your own family. Do you ever feel lonely?" I looked at him. I looked at the bustling room full of hope and future. I thought about Beatrice in her cold apartment. I thought about Paige in her prison cell awaiting trial. I thought about Tyrone in his truck fighting the wind. I thought about the doctor who tried to kill me and the lawyer who saved me. I put a hand on Marcus' shoulder. "Marcus," I said, my voice steady and sure, "I learned a hard lesson this year. A lesson I hope you never have to learn." I looked him in the eye, imparting the final truth of my life. Blood is just biology, Marcus. It is an accident of birth. It does not guarantee love. It does not guarantee loyalty. And it certainly does not make a family. I gestured to the room, to the people working together, building something real. Family is not who you are related to. Family is who you bleed for. Family is who stands by you when the money is gone and the lights go out. I smiled a genuine smile that reached my eyes. So to answer your question, Marcus, no, I am not lonely. For the first time in a long time, I am surrounded by family. And this time, I chose them. I picked up my briefcase and walked toward the door. I had a meeting with O'Malley. We were buying a hospital. We were going to make sure no one else ever had to fear their doctor. I walked out into the sunshine. The air was crisp. The city was alive. I was Solomon Banks. I was 71 years old, and I was just getting started. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more tales of justice and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have forgiven Tyrone? Would you have visited Beatrice? Until next time, remember the truth always wins. Stay strong. The betrayal taught me that family is defined by loyalty, not biology. I spent decades building an empire for people who only saw me as a paycheck. When I stopped protecting them from their own choices, I didn't destroy their lives. I simply let them face the consequences. True wealth isn't the money in the bank, but the peace of sleeping with a clear conscience and being surrounded by people who respect you for who you are, not what you have. Never be afraid to walk away from toxic relationships even if they share your last name. Your dignity is the only asset that truly matters. If this story resonated with you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel for more tales of truth and redemption. What would you have done in my place? Tell me in the comments below.